Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining this live stream here. So we'll have Mary Trump joining us in just a few minutes. If you joined last time, thank you for coming back. You will be happy to know that I bought a camera battery that I can plug in, so we won't have any more hot mic moments. I know that was fun for all involved. Also, I have more glasses tonight because if I'm going to be staring at the computer for the next 2 to 3 hours, I should probably be able to see. So, all fun stuff tonight. Again, Mary Trump is going to be joining in about 10 to 15 minutes. So, we'll bring him in. If you had a chance to check out our interview that we did just this past weekend, it's on my YouTube channel on the interviews playlist. So, in the meantime, I do want to touch on a point from last time. And this is, let's see. Actually, we're going to fix the audio issue. Let me be right back. Okay, let me know how the audio sounds now. Let's hear. Just let me know if everything sounds okay. I'm looking in the comments right now, so I'll be able to tell. Audio sound okay? Everything sound good? All right. Looks like we're good, yeah? Cool. Okay. So let's jump right in. One thing I wanted to touch on from last time, before I got cut off, was the issue of mail fraud. So this is something that the Trump administration has pointed to over and over and over again. That they'll point to little anecdotal moments that as proof that mail isn't working in this country, and so whatever ballots are coming in through the mail are going to be completely void, and the whole system's going to be rigged. That's the point of this, right? So I want to point to a few instances of mail fraud that Trump has brought up in the last few days and explain what they are. So the most recent instance that we've heard of is in New Jersey. Trump has pointed to the issue of dumped ballots in New Jersey as an issue of mail fraud. So according to the DOJ, there was a 26-year-old mail carrier who was arrested for dumping 2,000 pieces of mail in a dumpster in New Jersey. The mail included 99 general election ballots. So that mail carrier is actually being charged with delay of mail and obstruction of mail. And both of those have punishments of up to 5 years in prison and $250,000 in fines for one, 6 months in prison, and a few $1,000s in fines for the other. The point being that he's going to suffer the consequences of what he did. The other thing that he was caught because when you dump mail, the mail is assigned to a carrier's route. So it's not difficult. This isn't a difficult crime to get to the bottom of, right? So what this means is that one person committed a crime, which is a serious crime, and he got caught, meaning that the system is working as it should. And the point here is that this isn't evidence of systemic mail fraud. This is evidence that one guy committed a crime. A 26-year-old mail carrier in New Jersey committed a crime. It was discovered, and besides that, there were 2,000 pieces of mail. There were 2,000 pieces of mail that were dumped. 99 pieces of those mail within the 2,000 were ballots. This wasn't a crime targeting ballots in the mail. This was a crime where a mail carrier dumped mail, and a very small fraction of the pieces of mail were ballots. The point is that it wasn't targeting the election. It was just somebody committing a crime. By the way, the town that this was committed in is West Orange, New Jersey, which is a heavily Democratic town. So just something to think about the next time that Trump cries victim over the validity of mail ballots. I mean, this is something that's happening in a dark blue city within New Jersey, which is a dark blue state. So I know that Trump likes to perpetually cry victim, but this isn't something that would have impacted him. And in fact, it would be the opposite. It would be something that would have actually benefited him if it was evidence of systemic mail fraud, which again, it's not. Another instance of mail fraud that Trump brought forward was this idea that, and Trump brought this up at the debate too, that there was mail found in a river. There was never any mail found in a river. Kayleigh McEnany was actually questioned on this. She followed up and said that, in fact, this was in reference to mail found on the side of the road in Greenville, Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Elections Commission administrator, Megan Wolf, came out and announced that there were 0 Wisconsin ballots in that mail that was dumped on the side of the road. 0. So again, you have this issue. You have this issue of mail supposedly being dumped into the river, and yet at the same time, there was no river and there were 0 ballots. So I mean, if Trump is just worried about mail not necessarily getting somewhere, there's two issues. One, it has no impact on the election, and two, he might want to talk to Louis DeJoy, who's actually in charge of all of this. And finally, the last piece, and this is something that we've heard a lot about, and that's that there were 9 pieces of mail discarded in a trash bin in Pennsylvania. So the U.S. attorney who oversaw this case, his name is David Freed. David Freed was appointed by Donald Trump. And the first thing that David Freed did when he saw that there might be a situation where a few ballots were found in a waste paper basket was to come out and announce that 9 ballots had been thrown away and every single one of them was cast for President Donald Trump. Now, not only did that announcement go against DOJ protocol of commenting on ongoing investigations, it was wrong. Freed actually had to go back and amend his statement that not all the ballots were for Trump. Ultimately, we found out that it wasn't 9 ballots that were for Trump, it was 7 ballots that were for Trump. But the point here is that as soon as he said it, the Trump campaign in the White House ran with the headline. So it was already too late. That's all they needed. They just needed that one clip where a U.S. attorney comes out and says that 100% of ballots that were thrown away were for Donald Trump. And so yet again, he's the victim of this perpetual issue of mail fraud, which again isn't the case. Now, we find out that the reason that those 9 ballots were discarded in Pennsylvania was because they were military ballots from overseas and they weren't in properly marked envelopes. The worker who threw them out was a new worker. He was poorly trained, and when he opened them and realized that they were envelopes, instead of resealing them, which is protocol, he discarded them. And for that, and yet for that reason, even if they weren't discarded, they wouldn't have counted anyway because they were considered naked ballots. So in Pennsylvania, if you don't put your ballot into a secrecy envelope and then inside the outer envelope, they won't count. Now, this is something that, again, Trump has criticized, and you've seen him criticize this. But the point is that they wouldn't have counted because Trump and the Republican Party argued against this in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. This is something that the right went into the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and argued against ballots being counted that weren't in both envelopes. So then when you have these military ballots that come in from overseas and they're not in 2 different envelopes and they're considered naked ballots, they're not going to count because of the argument that was brought forth by Republicans and Trump. So in other words, Trump is criticizing something that he himself fought for in court. So again, this is a new ill-trained elections worker who opened ballots that weren't even marked as ballots. He threw them out. His supervisor realized what happened, meaning that the system worked. I mean, that's why we have this system in place. We have the system in place so that, when something goes wrong, and don't get me wrong, 9 ballots getting thrown away, any ballots getting thrown away is something that's gone wrong. But the point is that we have these checks and balances, and the fact that the elections supervisor caught on to this is just proof that the system is working exactly as it should. The whole point being of all of this is that there is no evidence of systemic mail fraud. That's the takeaway from all of this. And the point here is that we have a few individual situations where a few ballots are discarded. That's not evidence of mail fraud. Trump knows that, but the point here isn't the truth. The point is that he just wants to say it so that people will believe it. And he's right. I mean, now you have people that are out here thinking that ballots are flowing down rivers in the United States. The point is this toothpaste out of the tube strategy. It's once you ring the bell, it can't be unrung. So all he has to do is find one little tidbit to latch onto. And, in the instance of the Pennsylvania ballots where he had U.S. Attorney David Freed come out and say, well, you have all 9 ballots out of 9 ballots that were thrown away were for President Donald Trump. Cling on to that, and then you have the soundbite that you need to try to validate your claims that there's widespread systemic mail fraud in the United States and the whole system is rigged. What this also does is it sets the stage to fight this in court. So in the United States, you can sue for anything. So can he bring mail ballots to court? Sure. Will it matter? Not if we vote in such numbers that we render this impending lawsuit completely useless. I mean, if you lose by 100,000 votes, there's no court that's going to pick up Trump's suit and say, nah, we have the final say. It's not going to happen. So, the point always comes around to us. It's our responsibility to It's our responsibility to vote in such large numbers that we prevent, that we take away Trump's ability to even be able to use this against us. More broadly, though, the point here is to make you discouraged. It's to make you feel like it doesn't matter anyway, that it's all rigged, that there's fraud everywhere. That's the point. That's what he wants. So I would just say, do not validate his strategy. Don't give Donald Trump and this White House the satisfaction of not believing, the satisfaction of dissuading you from voting or discouraging you, leaving you discouraged with this whole process. You go and vote. Your vote will be counted. The point is that Trump is mad that he doesn't have any power here. You do. So I would just say, don't give that away. So now we're going to go to Mary Trump, who is waiting to come in. So just give me one quick sec. Mary, hi. Let's see. Let's work on a quick sound issue. One quick sec, Mary. We're just working on your sound. While we work on Mary's audio, we're going to be back in one quick sec. All right, let's see if, Mary, let me see your audio. Can't hear you yet. All right, Mary, do we have you? Uh, I'm not here, and I don't think. Can you, in the comments, let me know if you can hear Mary? All right, Mary, do we have you? No, I don't think so. All right, well, I'm so sorry, but thank you anyway for trying. We're gonna keep the live stream going. Mary, thank you so much, and we'll do this again when we have better luck with this technology. Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. So sorry about that. I really wanted to be able to bring Mary in here to speak, but obviously some technical issues. So with that said, we'll just keep on going. And there are some points that I want to bring up here. Let's talk about the actual debate that we're going to see. So again, thank you for tuning in. We're going to be starting. This debate's going to be starting at 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. I want to mention right off the bat that it was 4 years ago today that Trump's Access Hollywood tape came out. So not only was Trump worse than we could have ever imagined based off of that tape, but now we have somebody like Mike Pence, who we're going to see tonight, who's been complicit all along. So the worst part about Mike Pence is he's supposed to be this foil. He's supposed to be this foil to Donald Trump. I think we might be having some audio issues. Give me one quick sec. Let's go to be right back. Okay, cool. So we're back. Again, let's jump in. So again, like I was saying, the worst thing is we have Mike Pence who kind of hides behind. He's supposed to be the foil to Donald Trump. He's supposed to be the one that hides behind his Christianity to make Donald Trump more palatable to the religious, American religious people or evangelicals. But he does this while supporting an administration that's led by a guy who's cheated on his wives and used campaign funds to pay off women for affairs. One of the women that he paid off, I believe it was with Stormy Daniels, he had an affair with her while Melania was at home pregnant with their child. Melania was at home pregnant with Barron, and Donald Trump was out having an affair, and then he used his campaign funds to pay Melania off. So I'm sorry, pay Stormy Daniels off. So this is a guy who, this is who Mike Pence is defending, has rendered himself completely complicit in as the vice president in this administration. Pence is complicit in this administration, is locking kids in cages for the crime of escaping gangs and poverty in their own country. This is Mike Pence, who has put forward budgets with this White House, cutting off aid like Meals on Wheels to low-income folks, budgets that have cut Medicaid, which gives health coverage to seniors and low-income Americans. All that I can say about this is just like Jesus would have wanted, right? Like this stuff, what this administration does is so completely antithetical to the tenets of Christianity, and yet the fact that Pence still walks around portraying himself as the pious one in this administration is just kind of completely divorced from reality. So with that said, let's move over to some topics that we're going to see tonight. So the number one topic that we're going to talk about is coronavirus, obviously. Not only because 200,000 Americans have died from it, not only because we have 7.5 million cases in this country, but because the White House itself is crawling with it. You have Donald Trump, Melania, Kellyanne Conway, Kayleigh McEnany, plus 4 members of the White House press corps. We have Republican Senators Tom Tillis, Ron Johnson, Mike Lee, Trump's campaign manager, Bill Stepien, Trump's personal assistant, Nick Luna. We have Stephen Miller, thereby proving that coronavirus can spread from bats to humans, right back to bats, which, really goes to show how incredible of a virus this is. So tonight, I would just say, look for Kamala to capitalize on the fact that Mike Pence is the head of the White House coronavirus task force. He led this effort. His name is attached to this. So, if ever you were looking for the person responsible for what has become an unmitigated failure in government, not only an unmitigated failure, but the biggest failure that we've seen thus far in any government's response to this virus, is that Mike Pence is at the top of this. I guess I could say, who would have thought that the guy who oversaw the HIV/AIDS outbreak in Indiana would have overseen the worst pandemic in a century in the United States? Everybody? Oh, got it. Yeah. So we are now 8 months into this pandemic, and I think the most damning part about it is that there's still no plan. The difference being that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been, have full-throatedly expressed that they do have a plan. Their plan involves testing and contact tracing, coordinating a nationwide testing and contact tracing system. Their plan involves invoking the Defense Production Act so that they can produce enough PPE, so that we finally have enough PPE to keep our frontline workers safe, not only our frontline workers, but all Americans safe. They've announced part of their plan is to include free testing, treatment, and vaccines for everybody, and that those vaccines would be based on science. The release of the vaccine would be based on science and not the political calendar. I think so much of what we're seeing, somewhat shamelessly even, is that the vaccine, the release of Trump's vaccine is going to it'll just so happen to coordinate perfectly with the general election. So that's something that we're not going to, I don't think anybody looks at an impending vaccine coming out of the Trump administration that might come out November 1st and think that this is a vaccine worth trusting. Joe Biden and Kamala's plan to reopen will be based on safety. It'll include a focus on PPE for schools. It'll include a restart package for small businesses, to rehire employees, and to buy PPE for offices. So again, all of this, is going to be based on the science of coronavirus, what we know based on the science, and not just the politics of it. Moving on, something else we need to think about is what Mike Pence and the rest of the coronavirus task force and this administration knew versus what we knew. And the fact is that Trump and Pence knew, especially based off of the tapes with Bob Woodward, that this was more lethal than the flu, that it affected not just older people, but younger people too, that it was highly transmissible. We heard all these things from Trump himself in a taped interview with Bob Woodward. And I know some Republicans are trying to pass this off as if it was some gotcha moment, but Trump sat down for, I think it was 18 interviews with Bob Woodward, who's known for taking down another corrupt Republican president. So, this isn't something that he was trying to hide. And if it was something that he was trying to hide, he wasn't doing a great job with it. So, the way to hide information, the way to hide the fact that you're downplaying the virus is not to sit down for 2.5 dozen taped interviews with somebody, and the first thing you readily admit is that you were aware of the effects of this virus, and then you opted to purposefully downplay it so as not to panic the American people about something that they should know about. Also, Pence is going to, come in and try and convince us that everything is back to normal, that the country is opening up. All of this rhetoric aside, I would just say to look around. Your kids are at home because schools are closed, because it's too dangerous to have anybody congregate together. I would say that you yourself might be working remotely because going back to work and sitting around with your coworkers is too dangerous. People are still getting sick. They're still dying. Pence himself is surrounded with people who got sick just this week. This is not over. We're still mired in the middle of it because this is an administration that won't allow it to be over. This is an administration that's more concerned with optics than solutions. The fact is that the pandemic the outbreak will continue because the one thing that's going to actually stop this outbreak is if we take the steps to do so. But this administration is more concerned with pretending that everything is finished, that with taking its victory lap, that in actuality, that it's never going to stop so long as we have these people in office. Because if they haven't shown any interest in stopping it thus far, I mean, in the lead up to a national election where this is the number one issue for the American people, if this in and of itself wasn't enough to give them the kick that they needed to take it seriously, then can you imagine if Trump and Pence win re-election? Can you imagine if they're no longer even accountable to the American people, if they have carte blanche to do whatever they need to do for the next 4 years moving forward, and they don't have any election to stop them. So if coronavirus is the number one issue that you're focused on right now, politics aside, this is not a regular issue. If you want to be able to see your parents and grandparents, if you want your kids to be able to go back to school, if you want the economy to come back, if you want, if you've been furloughed from your job, the point is that the only way to be able to do that is to replace this administration with people in government who actually, first and foremost, acknowledge that this is a problem. That's the number one thing. And so long as we have Trump and Pence in office, there won't be any acknowledgement, and so there won't be any solution. Another topic that I expect that we'll cover tonight is going to be, this issue of law and order. And this is an issue that Trump has been hell-bent on keeping in the forefront because, this is what his Fox News fever dreams are made out of. This is what we see time and time again. Every September, October, before a national election, suddenly there's, an influx of dangerous people, whether they're coming from a migrant caravan out of Central America, although now, with immigration so low, now they had to find another subset of the population to scare everybody in their home, to scare an overwhelmingly white Republican base. And so those people, the people that they're going to use now to demonize are going to be BLM protesters who are apparently out causing havoc in your neighborhoods every single night. What I would say here on the issue of law and order is the fact is that there's only one person on that stage who's actually prosecuted murderers and rapists, and that's Kamala Harris. She's the only one, as California Attorney General, who made the California Department of Justice the first statewide agency to wear body cameras. She created the Bureau of Children's Justice to focus on crimes against children. She oversaw the nation's first implicit bias training rollout. These are all tangible examples of how Kamala Harris has led on this issue. Now, Trump, who couldn't even bring himself to condemn the Proud Boys, he told them to stand by. That's not a condemnation. That's an order. It's a call to action. They put it on T-shirts, right? Like, you can't call something a condemnation that they're then turning around and using on a rally cry in merch. You also can't call this a law and order administration when you have the president who extorted a foreign country, who orchestrated a large-scale cover-up to hide his involvement in it, who committed 10 instances of obstruction of justice, who committed campaign finance violations, and now we know with this New York Times story that he's possibly mired himself in bank and tax fraud. He had the IRS is disputing a $72 million write-off that he put forward. You can't have these things happen and then still, call yourself the law and order administration. So this isn't really, it was never about law and order. They don't care about that. What they care about is scaring you. That's why there is always, like I said, some group of dark-skinned people about to invade your neighborhoods when there's an election. The point is just to scare their base into voting for them. That's all they have. The left, and you see it you saw it in 2008 with Barack Obama. You're seeing it now with Joe Biden. The left is capable of running on a positive message because their agenda is popular. The things that Democrats stand for, the things that Democrats are trying to bring on here, our agenda items that we're coming into office with are popular with the American people. There's a mandate for these things. The healthcare, you look at healthcare and having run on that in 2018, that was a Democratic victory. Democrats took 41 seats in the House. It was the biggest midterm margin in American history, and that was all predicated on Democrats running on healthcare, and then Republicans are doing it again. Republicans aren't on the right side of history or aren't on the right side of the American people when it comes to healthcare. The same goes for, issues like women's reproductive rights. You have Republicans running right now on taking those away versus Democrats who have the support of 70% of Americans who support Roe. You have let's actually jump into this issue of that I think we're going to see. We're going to see Pence, I think, try to paint Kamala as too liberal. We'll hear him saying something along the lines of that she's this radical leftist, just like they tried to paint Joe Biden as. Neither one of those attacks actually ended up working, but they'll do it anyway. Again, underneath all of their fear-mongering, what she stands for is not radical in the slightest. What she stands for is protecting the ACA, which again, like I just said, that's something that we took 41 seats in the House in the last midterm cycle on. It's something that the vast majority of the American people in the high 60 percentile of Americans support. She stands for protecting Roe versus Wade. 70% of Americans support. She stands for supporting voting rights in this country. She stands for protections for dreamers who came here as children through no fault of their own. Again, that is an issue that the majority of the American people are on board with. And it's an issue that the Trump campaign has predicated, this presidency on destroying, on hurting immigrants and people of color and just any vulnerable populations that they can demonize, because the point is to keep everybody's attention off of what they're doing and onto some poor or vulnerable population that they can keep everybody angry at or scared at or use them as scapegoats. Kamala Harris is also the co-sponsor of the Green New Deal, and I know that Republicans have gone on and on about trying to turn the Green New Deal into some referendum on taking your hamburgers away and cow farts and whatever else they can cook up. But the point is that we're in the middle of an existential crisis right now, and it's not just young people who understand that. And I think Republicans are positioning themselves in a situation where they're going to render themselves completely obsolete. We're already seeing the effects of climate change now that need to be dealt with immediately. From the wildfires in California to droughts in the Midwest, you have hurricanes absolutely pummeling the southeast of this country. I mean, these, and I know that people on the right like to say like, oh, well, we've had hurricanes before. This isn't the first hurricane we've had. But the point is that the effects of climate change exacerbate these storms. There's a reason that we haven't seen storms like Hurricane Sandy, which we saw slam into New York and New Jersey. Actually, when I was living in New Jersey, I was there when Hurricane Sandy hit. That's not a normal occurrence. That's a storm that was exacerbated by the effects of climate change. Hang on one quick sec. Okay. So the point is that, the things that Kamala Harris stands for are all issues that are popular with the American people. And I think you won't have better proof of that than the fact that she and Joe Biden have the support of people like Colin Powell, John Kasich, Cindy McCain, 7 members of Bush's cabinet, and 500 former military and national security officials. The military is not exactly a liberal bastion of support. So I think, regardless of whatever Trump and Republicans and Mike Pence are going to say moving forward about this administration and this ticket, just take from the fact that, you have people spanning the entire political spectrum and what that tells you about whether their policies are too liberal. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break real quick, and I'll be back in about 2 minutes. Okay. Hi, everybody. Apologize for that. Let me know real quick if my audio sounds okay. Appreciate your help with this while we're working out these kinks. Obviously, I've done like a couple hundred, 850 videos so far on YouTube. 2 of them were live streams, so working on getting this as close to perfect as we can. But obviously some kinks to work out. So just let me know if my audio is good. Okay. Yeah. All right, cool. Looks like everybody's saying that the audio is good. So let's see. I think we can go over to this screen where. Okay. Yeah, we'll just keep it on me just now. Okay, awesome. All right. Glasses are going back on so I can actually see what I'm doing. Okay. The last thing I wanted to talk about was another issue that I think we're going to hear about is the economy. So this is supposed to be this is supposedly Trump and Pence's strongest issue, the economy, and it kind of defies logic because what we're seeing here, and actually Barack Obama took to Twitter today and posted a graphic that I think is pretty telling, and it shows that this administration right now is the first administration in modern American history to actually lose jobs. We're from the beginning of Trump's term to right now, he's actually net down 4 million jobs. Whereas Obama left office with having added 12 million jobs to the economy, Trump is down 4 million jobs. So the fact that they can even try to present themselves as strong on the economy kind of defies logic. But I think that's the whole point of Trump kind of being presenting himself as this marketing guru, right? Like the only thing he does is he just kind of tries to will something into existence by virtue of repeating it over and over and over again. So he's repeated this idea that the economy is super strong, and it's thanks to him, and it's the strongest economy we've ever had. And he points to here's what blows my mind especially. He points to the time before coronavirus actually hit this country, but you don't get to cordon off coronavirus and not count it, right? Like the federal government's response to coronavirus was the fault of this administration. It counts. You don't get to say like everything was great except for the things that weren't. So the fact is that even prior to coronavirus, we have a Pence-Trump administration that created an economy that only works for the rich. You know, you have a $1.5 trillion tax cut that benefited the wealthy and corporations, which then used that cash to give everyone raises. No, sorry, I'm sorry, I'm getting that wrong. They gave themselves executive salary raises and a record number of stock buybacks. That is what actually happened with this $1.5 trillion tax cut. So it looks like the debate is getting started, so let's bring that in here.
The University of Utah are united in purpose.
Okay.
We strive to provide
And
experience that will equip them
that
for a
feed
vibrant
is
future
still muted,
as
so
members of the global
we
community.
don't have any
Students
debate
are
audio yet. The debate starts in about 10 minutes. Cool. Okay, so let's just make sure that this works. Yep. Cool. And we're going to stay here. I'm going to have the debate in this corner right now so that as soon as everything begins, we'll know, and I'll just kick it right over to the debate. In the meantime, sticking with the economy, Pence is going to try to hit Kamala on tax cuts, right? Like Democrats are supposedly the socialists that are going to raise taxes for everybody, and you know, I think Trump has come out in a lunatic phase and said that everyone's going to be paying upwards of 80 or 90% taxes. Here's the truth, nice and simple. There will be no tax cuts under a Biden-Harris administration for anyone making under $40,000. The people who make above $40,000 are the top 1% of Americans. It's actually higher than that. It's a smaller percentage. I think it's like the top 0.75% of Americans. The average income for Americans is $63,000. $63,000. So how Republicans can walk around and demonize Democrats for trying to raise taxes on people making above $400,000, knowing that that's 6-7 times higher than what the average American makes, goes to show how out of touch they are with the American people. The fact is, like, how many failed attempts at trickle-down economics do we need before we acknowledge that it doesn't work, right? Because corporations are richer than they've ever been, and yet income equality is the worst we've ever seen. So the solution isn't just to continue making the rich even richer and then appeal to their humanity. It's to create a government that lifts people up so that everybody can partake in this economy. Okay, so moving on, something that I did want to talk about is that we're going to see at this debate stage are those plexiglass barriers that are going to be on stage. This is the first ever debate behind a plexiglass barrier. Now, the White House was desperate to turn this into a fight so that this wouldn't happen. And so what would have been a non-issue with these if they had just allowed plexiglass barriers to be put on the stage and left it alone like they should have, it would have come and gone and nobody would have talked about it. But they turned it into a major issue by virtue of trying to fight it. You know, the last few days, the stories that we've seen, and you'll see this in the corner of my screen right now, you'll see those two plexiglass barriers. The story was that Kamala was trying to fortress herself in. What this is just another example of this administration kind of falling victim to the Streisand effect, right? Like if this administration is good at one thing, it's trying to downplay something to the point, downplay something bad for them to the point where it becomes the only thing that anybody ever talks about. But what I think, these barriers, these plexiglass barriers signify is, it'll be an ever-present reminder on that stage of this administration's failures. That we still need them. 8 months into this pandemic is a testament to this administration's utter failure with what we're seeing on coronavirus right now. I mean, this should have been, look at other countries around the world. If you look at Canada, if you look at Australia, if you look at New Zealand and Germany, all around the world, the governments that took this seriously were able to get it under control. They have kids going back to school. They have They have jobs we're opening back up for their employees. New Zealand had, I think, 0 cases now. 0 cases. The White House is more dangerous than the entire country of New Zealand in terms of coronavirus cases. So what you have on that stage, and look, I get why Mike Pence wouldn't want these plexiglass barriers to be there. I mean, they are a living monument to this administration's failures. If you need a reminder of how badly they failed, Kamala Harris just has to knock like a few inches to her side to show the American people that now you have somebody from the White House that you can't even trust to be around because they're mostly infected with this virus. I mean, like I said, I mentioned earlier the amount of people that were infected with this virus. It's Donald Trump himself, the president of the United States. It's his wife. It's his press secretary. It's his campaign manager, his personal assistant, almost the entire press staff in Kayleigh McEnany's office. You have Republican senators, Mike Lee, Ron Johnson, Tom Tillis, and that's just the ones we're hearing about. Chuck Grassley wouldn't even take a test. So that should give you an idea of how seriously they're taking it. He wouldn't even take a test. And I think the point is that these Republicans don't want to give Democrats any more fodder with which to try and delay what is an illegitimate Supreme Court nomination with Amy Coney Barrett, and knowing that that they have no problem going in on the Senate floor and infecting their colleagues, Republican or Democrat, with coronavirus because they're so hell-bent on reshaping the judiciary. And that presented itself also in the fact that instead of passing coronavirus legislation for a country that's hurting right now, I mean, like I said, we have 8.5% unemployment. We have 11 million Americans out of work. We have 210,000 Americans who've died so far. We have 1,000 Americans dying every single day. We have states that are no longer being funded because coronavirus relief hasn't been passed. The fact that they're not going to pass that legislation because Trump decreed that they wouldn't, and yet they will move forward through hell or high water, even infected with coronavirus or not, with the nomination, the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett, just puts on full display their priorities. And their priorities are not the American people. It's putting their agenda forward that represents the will of a minority of people in this country. Like I said before, the things that Amy Coney Barrett represents, the things that a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court represents, don't follow the will of the American people. That it means the end of the ACA as we know it, which is the only law we have protecting coverage for people with pre-existing conditions, the end of women's reproductive health in this country, which again the vast majority of this country supports. Its voting rights. It's a host of different issues that only a very small faction of this country in the Republican Party actually wants to push forward. The Republican Party has not won a general election in 6 out of the last 7 elections. They've won 1 general election in the last 7 elections for president. That was George W. Bush's 2nd term. You have a Republican Senate, a majority Republican Senate that represents 15 million fewer Americans than their Democratic counterparts. We are living under minority rule, and the Supreme Court justice that they're trying to push through is an embodiment of that. And everything she represents is what they represent, and they don't represent the American people. They don't represent the majority of the American people. They don't represent the will of the American people. So let's see if we have any sound on this debate. Doesn't look like yet. They've turned on their sound on their feed. We should be starting in just a couple of minutes. And as soon as this debate begins, we're going to go full screen on this debate. So sticking with coronavirus and these plexiglass barriers that we're going to see, these ever-present reminders of this administration's failings, the fact is that the Trump-Pence administration has overseen an America that is sicker, that is poorer, that is weaker, that is more violent and more divided than we've ever seen in this country. There is no way to possibly spin this as a win. I mean, you're looking at 210,000 deaths. That's the 4th deadliest event in American history, behind the Civil War, behind the 1918 pandemic, and behind World War II. And now, in a time of of relatively high peace, I mean, and prosperity, we now all of a sudden have, coming up on 250,000 deaths, and it could be as many as double that. We heard as late as today, Joe Biden, when he gave his speech, said that we've had 210,000 deaths so far. We can expect another 210,000 deaths because nothing is being done to actually stop it. Again, this administration is just trafficking in the same denialism that A, they've been trafficking in since the beginning, and B, that they condemn China for. Trump's whole beef against China from the very start of this pandemic, from the very start of this outbreak, was that they weren't being honest with the international community. So the fact that he could then turn around and display the exact same denialism that he just got done criticizing with President Xi in China is you just have the height of hypocrisy with this administration, which I know is not going to knock anybody off of their chairs. The fact too is, we have to know, let's see if we have audio. Doesn't look like we have it yet. See? Yep, I don't think they've started yet. So we'll just hang on. And as soon as that audio comes in, as soon as that feed begins, because it's now 9 p.m., so the debate should be starting any moment now. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the debate as a full screen. And as soon as that debate begins, we'll make sure that you can hear it. In the meantime, I would just ask, I would say, again, thank you everybody who is watching on this live stream. Appreciate you watching it on this channel. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. I do breaking news videos every day. I've published about 850 so far. And we'll continue doing them every day. So I think, can you let me know in the comments now if you're able to hear the debate? Cool. Oh. Okay, cool. So you'll be able to hear the debate as soon as they start. There is no audio yet in their feed, so everything's all good to go on our end. It's just that we can't actually hear anything because they haven't unmuted their feed yet. So as soon as C-SPAN unmutes their feed, and as soon as the candidates take the stage, we'll be able to hear everything. Right now, there's just silence from that end. And I think they're beginning.
Good evening. From the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, welcome to the first and only Vice Presidential Debate of 2020, sponsored by the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm Susan Page of USA Today. It is my honor to moderate this debate, an important part of our democracy. In Kingsbury Hall tonight, we have a small and socially distant audience, and we've taken extra precautions during this pandemic. Among other things, everyone in the audience is required to wear a face mask, and the candidates will be seated 12 feet apart. The audience is enthusiastic about their candidates, but they've agreed to express that enthusiasm only twice, at the end of the debate and now when I introduce the candidates. Please welcome California Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence.
Thank you. Trevor.
Senator Harris and Vice President Pence, thank you for being here. We're meeting as President Trump and the First Lady continue to undergo treatment in Washington after testing positive for COVID-19. We send our thoughts and prayers to them for their rapid and complete recovery and for the recovery of everyone afflicted by the coronavirus. The two campaigns and the Commission on Presidential Debates have agreed to the ground rules for tonight. I'm here to enforce them on behalf of the millions of Americans who are watching. One note, no one in either campaign or at the Commission or anywhere else has been told in advance what topics I'll raise or what questions I'll ask. This 90-minute debate will be divided into 9 segments of about 10 minutes each. I'll begin a segment by posing a question to each of you, sometimes the same question, sometimes a different question on the same topic. You will then have 2 minutes to answer without interruption by me or the other candidate. Then we'll take 6 minutes or so to discuss the issue. At that point, although there will always be more to say, we'll move on to the next topic. We want a debate that is lively, but Americans also deserve a discussion that is civil. These are tumultuous times, but we can and will have a respectful exchange about the big issues facing our nation. Let's begin with the ongoing pandemic that has cost our country so much. Senator Harris, the coronavirus is not under control. Over the past week, Johns Hopkins reports that 39 states have had more COVID cases over the past 7 days than in the week before. 9 states have set new records. Even if a vaccine is released soon, the next administration will face hard choices. What would a Biden administration do in January and February that a Trump administration wouldn't do? Would you impose new lockdowns for businesses and schools and hotspots? A federal mandate to wear masks? You have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Thank you, Susan. Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease. 1 in 5 businesses closed. We're looking at frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers. We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last several months had to file for unemployment. And here's the thing. On January 28th, the Vice President and the President were informed about the nature of this pandemic. They were informed that it's lethal in consequence, that it is airborne, that it will affect young people, and that it would be contracted because it is airborne. And they knew what was happening and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare? They knew and they covered it up. The president said it was a hoax. They minimized the seriousness of it. The president said, you're on one side of his ledger if you wear a mask, you're on the other side of his ledger if you don't. And in spite of all of that, today they still don't have a plan. They still don't have a plan. Well, Joe Biden does. And our plan is about what we need to do around a national strategy for contact tracing, for testing, for administration of the vaccine, and making sure that it will be free for all. That is the plan that Joe Biden has and that I have, knowing that we have to get a hold of what has been going on, and we need to save our country. And Joe Biden is the best leader to do that, and frankly, this administration has forfeited their right to re-election based on this.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, more than 210,000 Americans have died of COVID-19 since February. The U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population is higher than that of almost every other wealthy nation on earth. For instance, our death rate is 2.5 times that of Canada next door. You head the administration's coronavirus task force. Why is the U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population higher than that of almost every other wealthy country? and you have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Susan, thank you. And I want to thank the Commission and the University of Utah for hosting this event. And Senator Harris, it's a privilege to be on the stage with you. And our nation has gone through a very challenging time this year. But I want the American people to know that from the very first day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first. Before, there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China. President Donald Trump did what no other American president had ever done, and that was he suspended all travel from China, the second largest economy in the world. Now, Senator Joe Biden opposed that decision. He said it was xenophobic and hysterical. But I can tell you, having led the White House Coronavirus Task Force, that decision alone by President Trump bought us invaluable time to stand up the greatest national mobilization since World War II. And I believe it saved hundreds of thousands of American lives. Because with that time, we were able to reinvent testing. More than 115 million tests have been done to date. We were able to see to the delivery of billions of supplies so our doctors and nurses had the resources and support they needed. And we began, really, before the month of February was out, to develop a vaccine and to develop medicines and therapeutics that have been saving lives all along the way. And under President Trump's leadership, Operation Warp Speed, we believe we'll have literally tens of millions of doses of a vaccine before the end of this year. The reality is, when you look at the Biden plan, it reads an awful lot like what President Trump and I and our task force have been doing every step of the way. I mean, quite frankly, when I look at their plan that talks about advancing testing, creating new PPE, developing a vaccine, it looks a little bit like plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about. And I think the American people know that this is a president who has put the health of America first, and the American people, I believe with my heart, can be proud of the sacrifices they have made. It's saved countless American lives.
Senator Harris, would you like to respond?
Absolutely. Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked. When you're looking at over 210,000 dead bodies in our country, American lives that have been lost, families that are grieving that loss. And you know, the vice president is the head of the task force and knew on January 28th how serious this was. And then thanks to Bob Woodward, we learned that they knew about it. And then when that was exposed, the vice president said, when asked, well, why didn't y'all tell anybody? He said, because the president wanted people to remain calm.
Well, let's get
no, but Susan, this is important.
Susan,
I want to add, but
here.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
I have to
I'm
weigh
speaking.
in.
Yeah, you can have 15 more
wanna,
seconds, and then we'll give the Vice President
Thank
a chance to
you. So I
respond.
want to ask the American people, how calm were you when you were panicked about where you're going to get your next roll of toilet paper? How calm were you when your kids were sent home from school and you didn't know when they could go back? How calm were you when your children couldn't see your parents because you were afraid they could kill them?
Let's give Vice President Pence a chance to respond. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute to respond.
You know, there's not a day gone by that I haven't thought of every American family that's lost a loved one. And I want all of you to know that you'll always be in our hearts and in our prayers. But when you say what the American people have done over these last 8 months hasn't worked, that's a great disservice to the sacrifices the American people have made.
It's not what the American people haven't done, it's what this administration hasn't done.
The reality is, Dr. Fauci said, everything that he told the president in the Oval Office, the president told the American people. Now, President Trump, I will tell you, has boundless confidence in the American people, and he always spoke with confidence that we'd get through this together. But when you say it hasn't worked, when Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and our medical experts came to us in the second week of March, they said if the president didn't take the unprecedented step of shutting down roughly half of the American economy, that we could lose 2.2 million Americans. Now, that's the reality.
That's if they did nothing. Nothing at all.
We could still lose more than 200,000 Americans.
Vice President
now, one
Pence,
life lost is too many, Susan. But the American people, I believe, deserve credit for the sacrifices that they have made, putting the health of their family and their neighbors first, our doctors, our nurses, our first responders.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
And I'm going to speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were in the front row in a Rose Garden event 11 days ago at what seems to have been a super spreader event for senior administration and congressional officials. No social distancing, few masks, and now a cluster of coronavirus cases among those who were there. How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID when you at the White House have not been doing so?
Well, the American people have demonstrated over the last 8 months that when given the facts, they're willing to put the health of their families and their neighbors and people they don't even know first.
When given the
President
facts.
Trump and I have great confidence in the American people and their ability to take that information and put it into practice. In the height of the epidemic, when we were losing a heartbreaking number of 2,500 Americans a day, we surged resources to New Jersey and New York and New Orleans and Detroit. We told the American people what needed to be done, and the American people made the sacrifices. When the outbreak in the Sun Belt happened this summer, again, Americans stepped forward. But the reality is the work of the President of the United States goes on. A vacancy on the Supreme Court of the United States has come upon us, and the President introduced Judge Amy Coney
Yes,
Barrett.
thank you. Thank you, Vice
But
President
at
Pence.
that, if I may say, that Rose Garden event, there's been a great deal of speculation about it. My wife Karen and I were there and honored to be there. Many of the people who were at that event, Susan, actually were tested
Yes.
for coronavirus, and it was an outdoor event, which all of our scientists regularly and routinely advise. The difference here is President Trump and I trust the American people to make choices in the best interest of their health. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris consistently talk about mandates, and not just mandates with the coronavirus, but a government takeover of health care,
Thank you,
the
Vice
Green New
President Pence.
Deal, all government control. We're about freedom and respecting the freedom of the American people.
Let's talk about
Freedom,
respecting
freedom
the
to
American
get sick
people.
and die.
You
That's
respect
what
the
the
American
Republican
people when you
Party
tell
is.
them the truth. You respect the American people when you have the courage
Which we've
to be a
always
leader
done.
speaking of those things that you may not want people to hear, but they need to hear so they can protect themselves. But this administration stood on information that if you had as a parent, if you had as a worker knowing you didn't have enough money saved up, and now you're standing in a food line because of the ineptitude of an administration that was unwilling to speak the truth to the American people. So let's talk about caring about the American people. The American people have had to sacrifice far too much because of the incompetence of this administration. It is asking too much of the people.
Susan, we talked
No,
about
Vice
It
this.
is
President
asking too much of the people.
Look-
That they would not be equipped with the information they need to help themselves to protect
Susan,
their
the
parents
President-
and
No,
their
I'm
children.
sorry. Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, I'm sorry.
It's fine, I'm Kamala.
No, you're Senator Harris to me. For life to get back to normal, Dr. Anthony Fauci and other experts say that most of the people who can be vaccinated need to be vaccinated. But half of Americans now say they wouldn't take a vaccine if it was released now. If the Trump administration approves a vaccine before or after the election, should Americans take it, and would you take it?
If the public health professionals, if Dr. Fauci, if the doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it, absolutely. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
Vice President Pence, there have been a lot of repercussions from this pandemic. In recent days, the president's diagnosis of COVID-19 has underscored the importance of the job that you hold and that you are seeking. That's our second topic tonight. It's the role of the vice president. One of you will make history on January 20th. You will be the vice president to the oldest president the United States has ever had. Donald Trump will be 74 years old on Inauguration Day. Joe Biden will be 78 years old. That already has raised concerns among some voters, concerns that have been sharpened by President Trump's hospitalization in recent days. Vice President Pence, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes without interruption.
Well, Susan, thank you, although I would like to go back.
I think we need to move on
well,
to the
thank
issue
you,
of
but I would like to
vice
go back
presidency.
because the reality is that we're going to have a vaccine, Senator, in record time, in unheard of time, in less than a year. We have 5 companies in phase 3 clinical trials, and we're right now producing tens of millions of doses. So the fact that you continue to undermine public confidence in a vaccine, if the vaccine emerges during the Trump administration, I think is unconscionable. And Senator, I just ask you, stop playing politics with people's lives. The reality is that we will have a vaccine, we believe, before the end of this year. And it will have the capacity to save countless American lives. And your continuous undermining of confidence in a vaccine is it's just unacceptable. And let me also say, the reality is when you talk about failure in this administration, we actually do know what failure looks like in a pandemic. It was 2009. The swine flu arrived in the United States. Thankfully, it ended up not being as lethal as the coronavirus. But before the end of the year, when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu, 60 million Americans contracted the swine flu. If the swine flu had been as lethal as the coronavirus, in 2009, when Joe Biden was vice president, we would have lost 2 million American lives. His own chief of staff, Ron Klain, would say last year that it was pure luck that they did, quote, everything possible wrong. And we learned from that. They left the strategic national stockpile empty. They left an empty and hollow plan, but we still learned from it. And I think the American people, I want to say again, can be proud of what we have done. And Senator, please stop undermining confidence in a vaccine.
Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked Vice President Pence, which is, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with Vice President Biden about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, and if you win the election next month, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
So let me tell you, first of all, the day I got the call from Joe Biden, it was actually a Zoom call, asking me to serve with him on this ticket was probably one of the most memorable days of my life. I thought about my mother, who came to the United States at the age of 19, gave birth to me at the age of 25 at Kaiser Hospital in Oakland, California. And the thought that I'd be sitting here right now, I know would make her proud, and she must be looking down on this. Joe and I were raised in a very similar way. We were raised with values that are about hard work, about the value and the dignity of public service, and about the importance of fighting for the dignity of all people. And I think Joe asked me to serve with him because, I have a career that included being elected the first woman district attorney of San Francisco, where I created models of innovation for law enforcement in terms of reform of the criminal justice system. I was elected the first woman of color and black woman to be elected Attorney General of the state of California, where I ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice. And there I took on everything from transnational criminal organizations to the big banks that were taking advantage of homeowners, to for-profit colleges that were taking advantage of veterans. And then, of course, now I serve in the United States Senate as only the second black woman ever elected to the United States Senate. I serve on the Senate Intelligence Committee, where I've been in regular receipt of classified information about threats to our nation and hotspots around the world. I've traveled the world. I've met with our soldiers in war zones. And I think Joe has asked me to serve with him because he knows that we share a purpose which is about lifting up the American people. And after the 4 years that we have seen of Donald Trump unifying our country around our common values and principles.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Neither President Trump nor Vice President Biden has released a sort of detailed health information that had become the modern norm until the 2016 election. And in recent days, President Trump's doctors have given misleading answers or refused to answer basic questions about his health. And my question to each of you in turn is this information voters deserve to know? Vice President Pence, would you like to go first?
Well, Susan, thank you. And let me say, on behalf of the President and the First Lady, how moved we've all been by the outpouring of prayers and concern for the president. And I do believe it's emblematic of the prayers and the concern that have ushered forth for every American impacted.
For contracting the virus that he unleashed on the entire country.
The president received at Walter Reed Hospital, the White House doctors, was exceptional. And the transparency that they practiced all along the way will continue. The American people have a right to know about the health and well-being of their president, and will continue to do that. But I'm just extremely grateful and was more than a little moved by the broad and bipartisan support. And Senator, I want to thank you and Joe Biden for your expressions of genuine concern. And I also want to congratulate you, as I did on that phone call, on the historic nature of your nomination.
Thank you.
I never expected to be on this stage 4 years ago, so I know the feeling. But the reality is we've got an election before the American people in the midst of this challenging year. And the stake.
You might notice he's not going to answer the question about whether we have a right to know Trump's health information.
Respond to the same question I asked, which is, do voters have a right to know more detailed health information
No answer.
about presidential candidates, and especially about presidents, especially when they're facing some kind of challenge?
Absolutely, and that's why Joe Biden has been so incredibly transparent, and certainly by contrast, the president has not, both in terms of health records, but also let's look at taxes. We now know, because of great investigative journalism, that Donald Trump paid $750 in taxes. When I first heard about it, I literally said, "You mean $750,000? And it was like, no, $750. We now know Donald Trump owes and is in debt for $400 million. And just so everyone is clear, when we say in debt, it means you owe money to somebody. And it'd be really good to know who the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, owes money to, because the American people have a right to know what is influencing the President's decisions. And is he making those decisions on the best interest of the American people, of you, or self-interest? So, Susan, I'm glad you asked about transparency, because it has to be across the board. Joe has been incredibly transparent over many, many years. The one thing we all know about Joe, he puts it all out there. He is honest, he is forthright, but Donald Trump, on the other hand, has been about covering up everything.
Thank you, Senator Harris. I want to give you a chance to respond, Vice President.
Well, look, I respect the fact that Joe Biden spent 47 years in public life. I respect your public service as well.
Thank you.
But the American people have a president who's a businessman, he's a job creator, who's paid tens of millions of dollars in taxes, payroll taxes, property taxes. He's created tens of thousands of American jobs. And the president said those public reports are not accurate. And the president's also released literally stacks of financial disclosures the American people can review just as the law allows.
Just not as taxes. I wonder why.
Joe Biden, 47 years in public service, compared to President Donald Trump, who brought all of that experience 4 years ago.
Thank you, Vice President.
And turned this economy around by cutting taxes, rolling back regulation, unleashing American
Vice President
energy,
Pence.
fighting for free and fair trade.
By the way, this is an economy that has 11 million jobs lost and 8.5% unemployment. When Obama left, 4.7% unemployment.
Third
Great
topic,
segue.
which is about the economy. This has been another aspect of life for Americans that's been so affected by this coronavirus. We have a jobs crisis brewing. On Friday, we learned that the unemployment rate had declined to 7.9% in September, but the job growth had stalled, and that was before the latest round of layoffs and furloughs in the airline industry at Disney and elsewhere. Hundreds of thousands of discouraged workers have stopped looking for work. Nearly 11 million jobs that existed at the beginning of the year haven't been replaced. Those hardest hit include Latinos, Blacks, and women. Senator Harris, the Biden-Harris campaign has proposed new programs to boost the economy, and you would pay for that new spending by raising $4 trillion in taxes on wealthy individuals and corporations. Some economists warn that could curb entrepreneurial ventures that fuel growth and create jobs. Would raising taxes put the recovery at risk? And you have 2 minutes to answer uninterrupted.
Thank you. On the issue of the economy, I think there couldn't be a more fundamental difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden believes you measure the health and the strength of America's economy based on the health and the strength of the American worker and the American family. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who measures the strength of the economy based on how rich people are doing, which is why he passed a tax bill benefiting the top 1% and the biggest corporations of America, leading to a $2 trillion deficit that the American people are going to have to pay for. On day one, Joe Biden will repeal that tax bill. He'll get rid of it. And what he'll do with the money is invest it in the American people. And through a plan that is about investing in infrastructure, something that Donald Trump said he would do. I remember hearing about some infrastructure week. I don't think it ever happened. But Joe Biden will do that. He'll invest in infrastructure. It's about upgrading our roads and bridges, but also investing in clean energy and renewable energy. Joe is going to invest that money in what we need to do around innovation. There was a time when our country believed in science and invested in research and development so that we were an innovation leader on the globe. Joe Biden will use that money to invest in education. So, for example, for folks who want to go to a 2-year community college, it will be free. If you come from a family that makes less than $125,000, you'll go to a public university for free. And across the board, we'll make sure that if you have student loan debt, it's cut by $10,000. That's how Joe Biden thinks about the economy, which is it's about investing in the people of our country as opposed to passing a tax bill, which had the benefit of letting American corporations go offshore to do their business.
Thank you,
You're
Senator
welcome.
Harris. Vice President Pence, your administration has been predicting a rapid and robust recovery, but the latest economic report suggests that's not happening. Should Americans be braced for an economic comeback that is going to take not months, but a year or more? You have 2 minutes to answer, uninterrupted.
When President Trump and I took office, America had gone through the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression.
75 straight months of growth.
As president, they tried to tax and spend and regulate and bail our way back to a growing economy. President Trump cut taxes across the board. Despite what Senator Harris says, the average American family of 4 had $2,000 in savings in taxes. And with the rise in wages that occurred, most predominantly for blue-collar, hardworking Americans, the average household income for a family of 4 increased by $4,000 following President Trump's tax cuts. But America, you just heard Senator Harris tell you, on day one, Joe Biden's going to raise your taxes. It's really remarkable to think.
If you're making above $400,000.
A time where we're going through a pandemic that lost 22 million jobs at the height. We've already added back 11.6 million jobs because we had a president who cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy, fought for free and fair trade, and secured $4 trillion from the Congress of the United States to give direct payments to families, save 50 million jobs.
The majority of the money that they gave through the tax breaks went to stock buybacks for executives.
The American people and the American worker through this. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want to raise taxes. They want to bury our economy under a $2 trillion Green New Deal, which you were one of the original co-sponsors of in the United States Senate. They want to abolish fossil fuels and ban fracking, which would cost hundreds of thousands of American jobs all across the heartland. And Joe Biden wants to go back to the economic surrender to China, that when we took office, half of our international trade deficit was with China alone. And Joe Biden wants to repeal all of the tariffs that President Trump put into effect to fight for American jobs.
We have a higher trade deficit with China now than we did when Trump took office.
Make no mistake about it, Susan. The American economy, the American comeback is on the ballot with 4 more years of growth and opportunity, 4 more years of President Donald Trump. 2021 is going to be the biggest economic.
The only administration in American history, modern American history, to lose jobs. 4 million jobs lost.
We saw enough of it in last week's debate, but I think this is supposed to be a debate based on fact and truth. And the truth and the fact is, Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000 a year.
He said he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well, wait.
I'm speaking.
It'd be important if you said the truth. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. That was tax cuts that gave the average working family $2,000 in a tax break every single year.
That is,
Senator,
that is
that's the math.
absolutely not true. That
Is he
tax
only
bill-
cutting? Is he only going to repeal part of the Trump tax cuts?
If you don't mind letting me finish, we can then
Please.
have a conversation, okay?
Please.
Okay. Joe Biden will not raise taxes on anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden will not end fracking. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden is the one who, during the Great Recession, was responsible for the Recovery Act that brought America back. And now the Trump-Pence administration wants to take credit when they rode the coattails of Joe Biden's success for the economy that they had at the beginning of their term. Of course, now the economy is a complete disaster. But Joe Biden, on the one hand, did that. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who has reigned over a recession that is being compared to the Great Depression. On the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who was responsible with President Barack Obama for the Affordable Care Act, which brought health care to over 20 million Americans and protected people with pre-existing conditions. And what it also did is it saved those families who otherwise were going bankrupt because of hospital bills they could not afford. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who's in court right now, trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which means that you will lose protections if you have pre-existing conditions. And this is very important, Susan.
Yes,
and it's
but we
important
need to give Vice President.
I'd just like to, he interrupted me, and I'd like to just finish, please. If you have a pre-existing condition, heart disease, diabetes, breast cancer, they're coming for you. If you love someone who has a pre-existing condition, they're coming for you. If you are under the age of 26 on your parents' coverage, they're coming for you.
Senator Harris, thank you.
You're
Let
welcome.
me give you a chance to respond.
Well, I hope we have a chance to talk about health care because Obamacare was a disaster. The American people remember it well. And President Trump and I have a plan to improve health care and to protect pre-existing
They just haven't released it yet.
American. But look, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. You yourself said on multiple occasions when you were running for president that you would ban fracking. Joe Biden looked at a supporter in the eye and pointed and said, I guarantee that we will abolish fossil fuels. They have a $2 trillion version of the Green New Deal, Susan, that your newspaper, USA Today, said really wasn't that very different from the original Green New Deal. More taxes, more regulation, banning fracking, abolishing fossil fuel, crushing American energy, and economic surrender to China is a prescription for economic decline. President Trump and I will keep America growing. The V-shaped recovery that's underway right now will continue with 4 more years of.
There's no V. We've lost 22 million jobs and we have 11 million back. That's not a V at all.
Quick segue to a new topic, which is climate change. And Vice President Pence, I'd like to pose the first question to you. This year, we've seen record-setting hurricanes in the South. Another one, Hurricane Delta, is now threatening the Gulf. And we have seen record-setting wildfires in the West. Do you believe, as the scientific community has concluded, that man-made climate change has made wildfires bigger, hotter, and more deadly, and have made hurricanes wetter, slower, and more damaging? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. Well, first, I'm very proud of our record on the environment and on conservation. According to all of the best estimates, our air and land are cleaner than any time ever recorded. Our water is among the cleanest in the world. And just a little while ago, the President signed the Outdoors Act. It's the largest investment in our public lands and public parks in 100 years. So President Trump has made a commitment to conservation and to the environment. Now, with regard to climate change, the climate is changing. But the issue is, what's the cause and what do we do about it?
Oh, God.
President Trump has made it clear that we're going to continue to listen to the science. Now, Joe Biden.
The science is clear.
Paris would put us back in the Paris Climate Accord. They'd impose the Green New Deal, which would crush American energy, would increase the energy costs of American families in their homes, and literally would crush American jobs. And President Trump and I believe that the progress that we have made in a cleaner environment has been happening precisely because we have a strong free market economy. you know, what's remarkable is the United States has reduced CO2 more than the countries that are still in the Paris Climate Accord, but we've done it through innovation, and we've done it through natural gas and
We've done it through companies and Democratic governors who've taken the lead where Trump's failed.
I know Joe Biden says otherwise now, as you do, but the both of you repeatedly committed to abolishing fossil fuel and banning fracking. And so by creating the kind of American innovation, we're actually steering toward a stronger and better environment. With regard to wildfires, President Trump and I believe that forest management has to be front and center, and even Governor Gavin Newsom from your state has agreed we've got to work on forest management. And with regard to hurricanes, the National Oceanic Administration tells us that actually as difficult as they are,
Thank you, Vice President.
there are no more hurricanes today than there were 100 years ago.
Thank you.
But many of the climate alarmists
Pence,
use
I'm sorry, your time
hurricanes
is up.
and wildfires to try and
Thank
sell
you,
their
Vice
bill of
President
goods of a
Pence.
Green New Deal. And President Trump and I are going to always put
Thank you,
American
Vice
jobs and
President
American
Pence.
workers first.
Senator Harris, as the Vice President mentioned, you co-sponsored the Green New Deal in Congress. But Vice President Biden said in last week's debate that he does not support the Green New Deal. But if you look at the Biden-Harris campaign website, it describes the Green New Deal as a crucial framework. What exactly would be the stance of a Biden-Harris administration toward the Green New Deal? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Sure. So first of all, I will repeat, and the American people know, that Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact. That is a fact. I will repeat that Joe Biden has been very clear that he thinks about growing jobs, which is why he will not increase taxes for anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. Joe Biden's economic plan, Moody's, which is a reputable Wall Street firm, has said will create 7 million more jobs than Donald Trump's. And part of those jobs that will be created by Joe Biden are going to be about clean energy and renewable energy. Because you see, Joe understands that the west coast of our country is burning, including my home state of California. Joe sees what is happening on the Gulf states, which are being battered by storms. Joe has seen and talked with the farmers in Iowa, whose entire crops have been destroyed because of floods. And so Joe believes, again, in science. I'll tell you something, Susan. I served, when I first got to the Senate, on the committee that's responsible for the environment. Do you know this administration took the word science off the website and then took the phrase climate change off the website? We have seen a pattern with this administration, which is they don't believe in science. And Joe's plan is about saying we're going to deal with it, but we're also going to create jobs. Donald Trump, when asked about the wildfires in California, and the question was, you know, the science is telling us this, you know what Donald Trump said? Science doesn't know. So let's talk about who is prepared to lead our country over the course of the next 4 years on what is an existential threat to us as human beings. Joe is about saying we're going to invest that in renewable energy. It's going to be about the creation of millions of jobs. We will achieve net zero emissions by 2050, carbon neutral by 2035. Joe has a plan. This has been a lot of talk from the Trump administration, and really it has been to go backward instead of forward. We will also re-enter the climate agreement with pride.
Senator Harris just said that climate change is an existential threat. Vice President Pence, do you believe that climate change poses an existential threat?
As I said, Susan, the climate is changing. We'll follow the science. But once again, Senator Harris is denying the fact that they're going to raise taxes on every American. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that on day one he was going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
This is his answer to climate change? Joe Biden's going to raise taxes on people above $400,000?
For across America. And with regard to banning fracking, I just recommend that people look at the record. You yourself said repeatedly that you would ban fracking. You were the first Senate co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. And while Joe Biden denied the Green New Deal, Susan, thank you for pointing out, the Green New Deal is on their campaign website. And as USA Today said, it's essentially the same plan as you co-sponsored with AOC when she submitted it in the Senate. And you just heard the senator say that she's going to resubmit America to the Paris Climate Accord. Look, the American people have always cherished our environment. We'll continue to cherish it. We've made great progress reducing CO2 emissions through American innovation and the development of natural gas through fracking. We don't need a massive $2 trillion Green New Deal that would impose all new mandates on American businesses and American families.
Thank you.
Joe Biden wants us to retrofit 4 million American business buildings. It makes no sense. It will cost jobs. President Trump is going to put America first. He's going to put jobs first, and we're going to take care of our environment and follow the science.
Thank you,
Vice President. On the issue of jobs,
Senator Harris.
Let's talk about that. The Vice President earlier referred to, as part of what he thinks is an accomplishment, the President's trade war with China. You lost that trade war. You lost it. What ended up happening is because of a so-called trade war with China, America lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. Farmers have experienced bankruptcy because of it. We are in a manufacturing recession because of it. And when we look at where this administration has been, there are estimates that by the end of the term of this administration, they will have lost more jobs than almost any other presidential administration. And the American people know what I'm talking about. You know, I think about 20-year-olds. You know, we have a 20-year-old, a 20-something-year-old, who are coming out of high school and college right now, and you're wondering, is there going to be a job there for me? We're looking at people who are trying to figure out how they're going to pay rent by the end of the month. Almost half of American renters are worried about whether they're going to be able to pay rent by the end of the month. This is where the economy is in America right now, and it is because of the catastrophe and the failure of leadership of this administration.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you just 15 seconds to respond, because then I want to move on to
Well, I'd love to respond. Look, lost the trade war with China. Joe Biden never fought it. Joe Biden has been a cheerleader for communist China through over the last several decades. And again, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. When Joe Biden was vice president, we lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs, and President Obama said they were never coming back. He said we needed a magic wand to bring them back. In our first 3 years after we cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy, this administration saw 500,000 manufacturing jobs created. And that's exactly the kind of growth we're going to continue to see as we bring our nation through this pandemic. But a Green New Deal, your massive new mandates, your Paris Climate Accord, it's going to kill jobs this time, just like it killed jobs.
I just need to respond very briefly,
15
please.
seconds, and
Thank
then we'll move
Thank you. Joe Biden is responsible for saving America's auto industry, and you voted against it. So let's set the record straight. Thank you.
I'd like to talk about China. We have, as our next topic, we have no more complicated or consequential foreign relationship than the one with China. It is a huge market for American agricultural goods. It's a potential partner in dealing with climate change in North Korea. And in a video tonight, President Trump again blamed it for the coronavirus, saying China will pay. Vice President Pence, how would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Competitors, adversaries, enemies? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Susan. Well, before I leave that, let me speak to voting records if I can. You know, everybody knows that NAFTA cost literally thousands of American factories to close. We saw automotive jobs go south of the border. President Trump fought to renegotiate NAFTA. And the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement is now the law of the land.
The whole thing about the USMCA is that it's the same thing as NAFTA.
Senator Kamala Harris was one of only 10 members of the Senate to vote against the USMCA. It was a huge win for American auto workers. It was a huge win for American farmers, especially dairy in the upper Midwest. But Senator, you said it didn't go far enough on climate change, that you put your radical environmental agenda ahead of American auto workers and ahead of American jobs. The American people deserve to know that. It's probably why Newsweek magazine said that Kamala Harris was the most liberal member of the United States Senate in 2019, more liberal than Bernie Sanders, more liberal than any of the others in the United States Senate. So Now, with regard to China, look, Susan, first and foremost, China is to blame for the coronavirus. And President Trump is not happy about it. He's made that very clear, made it clear again today. China and the World Health Organization did not play straight with the American people. They did not let our personnel into China to get information on the coronavirus until the middle of February. Fortunately, President Trump, in dealing with China from the outset of this administration, standing up to China that had been taking advantage of America for decades in the wake of Joe Biden's cheerleading for China, President Trump made that decision before the end of January to suspend all travel from China. And again,
Didn't work.
Joe Biden opposed President Trump's decision to suspend all travel from China. He said it was hysterical. He said it was
Thank you, Vice President
xenophobic.
Pence.
But President Trump has
Vice President
stood.
Pence.
We have the most cases and the most deaths in the world. Obviously, a travel ban did not work.
President
We
Pence.
want to improve the relationship, but we're going to level the playing field, and we're going to hold
Vice President
China
Pence.
accountable for what they did to America with the coronavirus.
Thank you. Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked the Vice President. How would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Are we competitors, adversaries, enemies? You'll have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Susan, the Trump administration's perspective and approach to China has resulted in the loss of American lives, American jobs, and America's standing. There's a weird obsession that President Trump has had with getting rid of whatever accomplishment was achieved by President Obama and Vice President Biden. For example, they created within the White House an office that basically was responsible for monitoring pandemics. They got rid of it.
Not true.
There was a team of disease experts that
Happened in 2018.
President Obama and Vice President Biden dispatched to China to monitor what is now predictable and what might happen. They pulled them out. We now are looking at 210,000 Americans who have lost their lives. Let's look at the job situation. We mentioned before the trade deal, the trade war, they wanted to call it, with China. It resulted in the loss of over 300 manufacturing jobs and a manufacturing recession, and the American consumer paying thousands of dollars more for goods because of that failed war that they called it. Then let's talk about standing. Pew, a reputable research firm, has done an analysis that shows that leaders of all of our formerly allied countries have now decided that they hold in greater esteem and respect Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, than they do Donald Trump, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. This is where we are today because of a failure of leadership by this administration.
Senator Harris, we've seen changes in the role of the United States in terms of global leadership over the past 4 years. And of course, times do change. What's your definition? We've seen strains with China, of course, as the Vice President mentioned. We've seen strains with our traditional allies in NATO and elsewhere. What is your definition of the role of American leadership in 2020?
So, you know, Joe is, I love talking with Joe about a lot of these issues. And, you know, Joe, I think he said it quite well. He says, you know, foreign policy, it might sound complicated, but really it's relationships. So just think about it as relationships. And so we know this in our personal and professional relationships. You got to keep your word to your friends. You got to be loyal to your friends. People who've stood with you, you got to stand with them. You got to know who your adversaries are and keep them in check. But what we have seen with Donald Trump is that he has betrayed our friends and embraced dictators around the world. Let's take, for example, Russia. So, Russia, I serve on the Intelligence Committee of the United States Senate. America's intelligence community told us Russia interfered in the election of the President of the United States in 2016 and is playing in 2020. Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, said the same. But Donald Trump, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America, prefers to take the word of Vladimir Putin over the word of the American intelligence community. You look at our friends at NATO. He has walked away from agreements. You can look at the Iran nuclear deal, which now has put us in a position where we are less safe because they are building up what might end up being a significant nuclear arsenal. We were in that deal, guys. We were in the Iran nuclear deal with friends, with allies around the country. And because of Donald Trump's unilateral approach to foreign policy, coupled with his isolationism, he pulled us out and has made America less safe. So, Susan, it's about relationships. And the thing that has always been part of the strength of our nation, in addition to our great military, has been that we keep our word. But Donald Trump doesn't understand that because he doesn't understand what it means to be honest.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you a chance to respond.
Well, thank you. Well, President Trump kept his word when we moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel.
Who's voting on that?
Biden was vice president. They promised to do that, and they never did. We've stood strong with our allies, but we've been demanding. NATO is now contributing more to our common defense than ever before, thanks to President Trump's leadership. We've strengthened our alliances across the Asia-Pacific, and we've stood strong against those who would do us harm. You know, when President Trump came into office, ISIS had captured an area of the Middle East the size of Pennsylvania. But President Trump unleashed the American military, and our armed forces destroyed the ISIS caliphate and took down their leader, al-Baghdadi, without one American casualty. Al-Baghdadi was responsible for the death of thousands. But notably, America's hearts today are with the family of Kayla Mueller, her parents of which are here with us tonight in Salt Lake City. Today, 2 of the ISIS killers responsible for Kayla Mueller's murder were brought to justice in the United States. Jihadi John was killed on the battlefield along with the other beetle. The reality is that when Joe Biden was vice president, we had an opportunity to save Kayla Mueller. It breaks my heart to reflect on it, but the military came into the Oval Office, presented a plan. They said they knew where Kayla was. Baghdadi had held her for 18 months, abused her mercilessly before they killed her. But when Joe Biden was vice president, they hesitated for a month. And when armed forces finally went in, it was clear she'd been moved 2 days earlier. And her family says with a heart that broke the heart of every American that if President Donald Trump had been president, they believe Kayla would be alive today.
Thank you, Vice
Look,
President.
we destroyed the ISIS caliphate. And you talk about
So his entire argument is that something theoretical might have happened if Trump might have been
$1
president.
billion to the leading state sponsor
Thank you, Vice
of
President
terrorism.
Pence.
President Donald Trump got us out of the deal.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
And when Qasem Soleimani was traveling to Baghdad
Thank you,
to do
Vice President
harm
Pence.
to Americans, President Donald Trump took
Thank you,
him
Vice
out.
President Pence.
And America is safer, our allies are safer, and the American people know President Donald Trump will never
Thank you,
hesitate
Vice President
to take
Pence.
action.
I would like to give Senator Harris a chance to respond
Tell that to Jamal Khashoggi's
to the
family.
topics we want to talk
But
about.
I would like equal time.
Yes,
Thank you.
please go ahead.
First of all, to the Mueller family, I know about your daughter's case, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. What happened to her is awful, and it should have never happened. And I know Joe feels the same way. And I know that President Obama feels the same way. But you mentioned Soleimani. Let's start there. So after the strike on Soleimani, there was a counter strike on our troops in Iraq. And they suffered serious brain injuries. And do you know what Donald Trump dismissed them as? Headaches. And this is about a pattern of Donald Trump's, where he has referred to our men who are serving in our military as suckers and losers. Donald Trump, who went to Arlington Cemetery and stood above the graves of our fallen heroes and said, what's in it for them? Because, of course, you know, he only thinks about what's in it for him. Let's take what he said about John McCain a great American hero. And Donald Trump says he doesn't deserve to be called a hero because he was a prisoner of war. And this is very important when you want to talk about who is the current commander-in-chief and what they care about and what they don't care about. Public reporting that Russia had bounties on the heads of American soldiers. And you know what a bounty is? It's somebody puts a price on your head and they will pay it if you are killed. And Donald Trump had talked at least 6 times to Vladimir Putin and never brought up the subject. Joe Biden would never do that.
Thank you.
Joe Biden would, but Joe Biden would hold Russia to account for any threat to our nation's security or to our troops who are sacrificing their lives for the sake of our democracy and our safety.
Thank you, Senator Harris. This is such an important issue, but we have other important issues as well. And
Susan,
I want to make sure we have a chance
I really have to
talk
respond to
about
that. Look, she has
15 seconds because
well, I got to have
trying
more
to
than
keep,
that. Look,
well, I'm sorry, but Vice President
look,
Pence, you've had more time than she's had so far.
The slanders against President Donald Trump regarding men and women of our armed forces are absurd.
I'm sorry, Vice
My
President
son
Pence.
is a captain in the United
Yes.
States Marine Corps. My son-in-law is deployed in the United States Navy. I can assure all of you, with sons and daughters serving in our military, President Donald Trump not only respects but reveres all of those who serve in our armed forces, and any suggestion otherwise is ridiculous.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
How many tours of Vietnam did he serve? Can somebody remind me?
No.
Vice President
There's a
Pence, I did not,
pattern that you
excuse
can't
me,
deny.
Susan, the
I did
American
not
people
create
deserve
the
to know
rules for tonight.
Joe Biden
Your
and
campaigns agreed to the rules for tonight's
I-
debate with the Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm here to enforce them, which involves moving from one topic to another, giving roughly equal time to both of you,
Go right ahead.
which is what I'm trying very hard to do.
Go right ahead.
So I want to go ahead and move to the next topic, which is an important one, as the last topic was, and that is the Supreme Court. On Monday, the Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled to open hearings on Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court. Senator Harris, you'll be there as a member of the committee. Her confirmation would cement the court's conservative majority and make it likely open to more abortion restrictions, even to overturning the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling. Access to abortion would then be up to the states. Vice President Pence, you're the former governor of Indiana. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want Indiana to do? Would you want your home state to ban all abortions? You have 2 minutes, uninterrupted.
Well, thank you for the question, but I'll use a little bit of my time to respond to that very important issue.
He's not going to answer.
The American people deserve to know Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, was responsible for the death of hundreds of American service members.
There's a reason he's talking about Qasem Soleimani during a question about abortion. It's because 70% of Americans agree with Roe, and he doesn't want to answer the question because he knows what the truth is.
Qasem Soleimani is gone. But you deserve to know that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris actually criticized the decision to take out Qasem Soleimani. It's really inexplicable, but with regard to Joe Biden, it's explainable. Because history records that Joe Biden actually opposed the raid against Osama bin Laden. It's absolutely essential that we have a commander-in-chief who will not hesitate to act to protect American lives and to protect American service members, and that's what you have in President Donald Trump. Now, with regard to the Supreme Court of the United States, let me say President Trump and I could not be more enthusiastic about the opportunity to see Judge Amy Coney Barrett become Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Now, she's a brilliant woman. And,
Still won't answer the
She
question.
will bring a lifetime of experience and a sizable American family to the Supreme Court of the United States. And our hope is, in the hearing next week, unlike Justice Kavanaugh received with treatment from you and others, we hope she gets a fair hearing. And we particularly hope that we don't see the kind of attacks on her Christian faith that we saw before. I mean, the Democrat chairman of the Judiciary Committee before, when Judge Barrett was being confirmed for the Court of Appeals, expressed concern that the dogma of her faith lived loudly in her. Dick Durbin of Illinois said that it was a concern. Senator, I know one of our judicial nominees you actually attacked because they were a member of the Catholic Knights of Columbus, just because the Knights of Columbus holds pro-life views and
Thank you.
pro-marriage views.
Thank you, Vice President
So
Pence. Your
my
time
hope
is
is
up.
that when the hearing takes place, that
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
Never
Judge
answered the
Amy
question.
Coney Barrett will be respected,
Thank you,
treated
Vice President
respectfully,
Pence.
voted and confirmed
Thank
to the
you.
Supreme Court of the United States.
Senator Harris, you're
Never answered the question.
former Attorney General of California. So let me ask you a parallel question to the one I posed to the Vice President. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want California to do? Would you want your home state to enact no restrictions on access to abortion? And you have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. First of all, Joe Biden and I are both people of faith, and it's insulting to suggest that we would knock anyone for their faith. And in fact, Joe, if elected, will be only the second practicing Catholic as President of the United States. On the issue of this nomination, Joe and I are very clear, as are the majority of the American people. We are 27 days before the decision about who will be the next president of the United States. And, you know, before, when this conversation has come up, you know, it's been about election year or election time. We're literally in an election. Over 4 million people have voted. People are in the process of voting right now. And so Joe has been very clear, as the American people are. Let the American people fill that seat in the White House, and then we'll fill that seat on the United States Supreme Court. And to your point, Susan, the issues before us couldn't be more serious. There's the issue of choice, and I will always fight for a woman's right to make a decision about her own body. It should be her decision and not that of Donald Trump and the Vice President, Michael Pence. But let's also look at what else is before the court. It's the Affordable Care Act. Like, literally in the midst of a public health pandemic, when over 210,000 people have died and 7 million people probably have what will be in the future considered a pre-existing condition because you contracted the virus. Donald Trump is in court right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. And I said it before, and it bears repeating. This means that there will be no more protections if they win for people with pre-existing conditions. No. This means that over 20 million people will lose your coverage. It means that if you're under the age of 26, you can't stay on your parents' coverage anymore. And here's the thing. The contrast couldn't be more clear. They're trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Joe Biden is saying, let's expand coverage. Let's give you a choice of a public option or private coverage. Let's bring down premiums.
Thank you, Senator
Let's
Harris.
lower Medicare eligibility to 60.
Thank you, Senator
That's true
Harris.
leadership.
You know, you mentioned earlier, Vice President Pence, that the president was committed to maintaining protections for people with pre-existing conditions. But you do have this court case that you are supporting, your administration supporting, that would strike down the Affordable Care Act. The president says, President Trump says that he's going to protect people with pre-existing conditions, but he has not explained how he would do that. And that was one of the toughest nuts to crack when they were passing the Affordable Care Act. So tell us specifically, how would your administration protect Americans with pre-existing conditions to have access to affordable insurance if the Affordable Care Act is struck down?
Well, they'll release it in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Susan.
Just watch.
Let me just say, addressing your very first question, I couldn't be more proud to serve as vice president to a president who stands without apology for the sanctity of human life. I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. And this is another one of those cases where there's such a dramatic contrast. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris support taxpayer funding of abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. Late-term abortion.
Not true.
They want to increase funding to Planned Parenthood of America. Now, for our part, I would never presume how Judge Amy Coney Barrett would rule on the Supreme Court of the United States, but
right.
We'll continue to stand strong for the right to life. When you speak about the Supreme Court, though, I think the American people really deserve an answer, Senator Harris. Are you and Joe Biden going to pack the court if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed? I mean, there have been 29 vacancies on the Supreme Court during presidential election years, from George Washington to Barack Obama. Presidents have nominated in all 29 cases. But your party is actually openly advocating adding seats to the Supreme Court, which has had 9 seats for 150 years, if you don't get your way. This is a classic case of if you can't win by the rules, You're going to change the rules. Now, you've refused to answer the question. Joe Biden
Right,
has
Merrick
refused
Garland?
to answer the question. So I think the American people would really like to know, if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed at the Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that a little more. In 1864.
Well, I'd like you to answer the question.
Mr.
Yes,
Vice President, I'm
please,
speaking.
very
I'm
fast.
speaking. Okay. In 1864, one of the, I think, political heroes, certainly of the president, I assume of you also, Mr. Vice President, is Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham Lincoln was up for re-election, and it was 27 days before the election, and a seat became open on the United States Supreme Court. Abraham Lincoln's party was in charge not only of the White House, but the Senate. But Honest Abe said it's not the right thing to do. The American people deserve to make the decision about who will be the next president of the United States, and then that person can select who will serve for a lifetime on the highest court of our land. And so Joe and I are very clear. The American people are voting right now, and it should be their decision about who will serve on this most important body for a lifetime.
Thank you,
And the
Senator
American
Harris.
people, Susan, are voting right now. They'd like to know if you and Joe Biden are going to pack the Supreme Court if you don't get your way in this nomination.
Let's talk about packing.
You once
Come
again
on.
gave a non-answer. Joe Biden gave a non-answer.
Trying to answer you
The
now.
American people deserve a straight answer. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the straight answer is they are going to pack the Supreme Court if they somehow
should.
win this election.
Th-
Men and
Mr.
women,
Vice
I
President,
got to
I
tell you,
think it's-
people across this country, if you cherish our Supreme Court, if you cherish the separation of powers, you need to reject the Biden-Harris ticket. Come November the 3rd, re-elect President Donald Trump, and we'll stand
Separation
by
of
that
powers.
separation of powers in a 9-seat Supreme Court.
Yeah,
Thank
let's talk about packing the court then. Let's talk about the
Please.
fact. Yeah, I'm about to. So, the Trump-Pence administration has been, because I sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Susan, as you mentioned, and I've witnessed the appointments for lifetime appointments to the federal courts, district courts, courts of appeal. People who are purely ideological, people who have been reviewed by legal professional organizations and found to have been not competent, are substandard. And do you know that of the 50 people who President Trump appointed to the Court of Appeals for lifetime appointments, not one is black? This is what they've been doing. You want to talk about packing a court? Let's have that discussion.
All right, thank you, Senator. Let's go on and talk about the issue of racial justice.
I just want the record to reflect she never answered the question. So I think the American people,
Thank
maybe
you.
in the next debate, Joe Biden will answer the question.
you-
But I think
thank
the
you.
American people know the answer.
Thank you, Vice President. In March, Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old emergency room technician in Louisville, was shot and killed after police officers executing a search warrant in a narcotics investigation broke into her apartment. The police said they identified themselves. Taylor's boyfriend said he didn't hear them do that. He used a gun registered to him to fire a shot, which wounded an officer. The officers then fired more than 20 rounds into the apartment. They say they were acting in self-defense. None of them have been indicted in connection with her death. Senator Harris, in the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes.
I don't believe so. And I've talked with Breonna's mother, Tamika Palmer, and her family. And her family deserves justice. She was a beautiful young woman. She had as her life goal to become a nurse, and she wanted to become an EMT to first learn what's going on out on the street so she could then become a nurse and save lives. And her life was taken unjustifiably and tragically and violently. And it brings me to, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that America witnessed, during which an American man was tortured and killed under the knee of an armed, uniformed police officer. And people around our country of every race, of every age, of every gender, perfect strangers to each other, marched shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, fighting for us to finally achieve that ideal of equal justice under law. And I was a part of those peaceful protests. And I believe strongly that, first of all, we are never going to condone violence, but we always must fight for the values that we hold dear, including the fight to achieve our ideals. And that's why Joe Biden and I have said on this subject, look, and I'm a former career prosecutor. I know what I'm talking about. Bad cops are bad for good cops. We need reform of our policing in America and our criminal justice system, which is why Joe and I will immediately ban chokeholds and carotid holds. George Floyd would be alive today if we did that. We will require a national registry for police officers who break the law. We will, on the issue of criminal justice reform, get rid of private prisons and cash bail, and we will decriminalize marijuana, and we will expunge the records of those who have been convicted of marijuana. This is a time for leadership on a tragic, tragic issue of unarmed black people in America who have been killed.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me pose the same question to you. In the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes, uninterrupted.
Well, our heart breaks for the loss of any innocent.
He's not going to answer this question.
And the family of Breonna Taylor has our sympathies. But I trust our justice system, a grand jury that refused the evidence. And it really is remarkable that as a former prosecutor, you would assume that an impaneled grand jury looking at all the evidence got it wrong. But you're entitled to your opinion, Senator. I think, look, and with regard to George Floyd, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd. Justice will be served. But there's also no excuse for the rioting and looting that followed.
Here we go. Violence in cities.
It really is astonishing. Flora Westbrook is with us here tonight in Salt Lake City. Just a few weeks ago, I stood at what used to be her salon. It was burned to the ground by rioters and looters. And Flora is still trying to put her life back together. And I must tell you, this presumption that you hear consistently from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that America is systemically racist, and that, as Joe Biden said, that he believes that law enforcement has an implicit bias against minorities.
This ought to be good.
Is a great insult to the men and women who serve in law enforcement. And I want everyone to know, who puts on the uniform of law enforcement every day, that President Trump and I stand with you. And it is remarkable that when Senator Tim Scott tried to pass a police reform bill, brought together a group of Republicans and Democrats, Senator Harris, you got up and walked out of the room. And then you filibustered Senator Tim Scott's bill on the Senate floor that would have provided new accountability, new resources. Look, we don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement, improving public safety, and
there's a fly on Mike Pence's head. Just thought you guys
minorities.
should know.
Under President Trump's leadership, we'll always stand with law enforcement, and we'll do what we've done from day one, and that is improve the lives of African Americans.
Thank you, Vice President
Record unemployment, record
Vice
investments in
President Pence, your time
education,
is
and we'll
up.
fight for school choice for all of our members.
Thank you, Vice
I'd
President.
like to respond.
Senator Harris.
I will not sit here and be lectured by the Vice President on what it means to enforce the laws of our country. I am the only one on this stage who has personally prosecuted everything from child sexual assault to homicide. I'm the only one on this stage who has prosecuted the big banks for taking advantage of America's homeowners. I'm the only one on this stage who prosecuted for-profit colleges for taking advantage of our veterans. And the reality of this is that we are talking about an election in 27 days, where last week the President of the United States took a debate stage in front of 70 million Americans and refused to condemn white supremacists.
Not true.
And
Not true.
it wasn't like he didn't have a chance. He didn't do it, and then he doubled down. And then he said, when pressed, stand back, stand by. And this is a part of a pattern of Donald Trump's. He called Mexicans rapists and criminals. He instituted as his first act a Muslim ban. He, on the issue of Charlottesville, where people were peacefully protesting the need for racial justice, where a young woman was killed. And on the other side, there were neo-Nazis carrying tiki torches, shouting racial epithets, anti-Semitic slurs. And Donald Trump, when asked about it, said there were fine people on both sides. This is who we have as the President of the United States. And America, you deserve better. Joe Biden will be a president who brings our country together.
Senator Harris,
and recognizes the beauty in our diversity and the fact that we
Senator
all
Harris,
have so
you.
much more in common than what separates us.
Vice President Pence, let me give you a minute to respond.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that very much. You know, I think this is one of the things that makes people dislike the media so much in this country, Susan, is that you selectively edit, just like Senator Harris did, comments that President Trump and I and others on our side of the aisle make. I mean, Senator Harris conveniently omitted, after the president made comments about people on either side of the debate over monuments, he condemned the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists, and has done so repeatedly. You're concerned that he doesn't condemn neo-Nazis. President Trump has Jewish grandchildren. His daughter and son-in-law are Jewish. This is a president who respects and cherishes all of the American people. But you talk about having personally prosecuted. I'm glad you brought up your record, Senator.
Thank you.
But I really need to make this point. When you were DA in San Francisco, when you left office, African Americans were 19 times more likely to be prosecuted for minor drug offenses than whites and Hispanics. When you were Attorney General of California, you increased the disproportionate incarceration of blacks in California. You did nothing on criminal justice reform in California. You didn't lift a finger to pass the First Step Act on Capitol Hill. I mean, the reality is your record speaks for itself. President Trump and I have fought for criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Vice President
We've fought
Pence.
for educational choice and opportunities for African Americans, all of our
Thank you,
minorities.
sir.
And we'll do it for 4 more
Thank
years.
you. You know, there is no more important issue than the final issue that we're going to talk about tonight, and that is the issue of the election itself.
Susan, he attacked my record. I would like an opportunity to respond.
Let me give you 30 seconds because we're running out of time.
I appreciate that. First of all, having served as the Attorney General of the state of California, the work that I did is a model of what our nation needs to do, and we will be able to do under a Joe Biden presidency. Our agenda includes what this administration has failed to do. It will be about not only instituting a ban on chokeholds and carotid holes.
Thank you.
Not only.
Thank you, Senator
I
Harris.
would like to go through.
These are points that you made earlier in the hour, and I want to talk about the election itself before we have to.
But I want to talk about the connection between what Joe and I will do and my record, which includes I was the first statewide officer to institute a requirement that my agents would wear body cameras and keep them on full time. We were the first to initiate a requirement that there would be a training for law enforcement on implicit bias because, yes, Joe Biden and I recognize that implicit bias does exist, Mr. Vice President, contrary to what you may believe. We did the work of instituting reforms that were about investing in reentry. This is the work that we have done and the work we will do going forward. And again, I will not be lectured by the Vice President on our record of what we have done in terms of law enforcement and keeping our communities safe and a commitment to reforming the criminal justice system of America.
Thank you, Senator Harris. And I'd like to pose I'd like you to respond first to the question on our final topic, the election itself. President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If your ticket wins and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what steps would you and Vice President Biden then take? What would happen next? You have 2 minutes.
So I'll tell you, Joe and I are, I think, particularly proud of the coalition that we've built around our campaign. We probably have one of the broadest coalitions of folks that you've ever seen in a presidential race. Of course, we have the support of Democrats, but also independents and Republicans. In fact, 7 members of President George W. Bush's cabinet are supporting our ticket. We have the support of Colin Powell, Cindy McCain, John Kasich, over 500 generals, retired generals, and former national security experts and advisors are supporting our campaign. And I believe they are doing that because they know that Joe Biden has a deep, deep-seated commitment to fight for our democracy and to fight for the integrity of our democracy and to bring integrity back to the White House. And so we believe in the American people. We believe in our democracy. And here's what I'd like to say to everybody. Vote. Please vote. Vote early. Come up with a plan to vote. Go to iwillvote.com. You can also go to joebiden.com. We have it within our power in these next 27 days to make the decision about what will be the course of our country for the next 4 years. And it is within our power, and if we use our vote and we use our voice, we will win. And we will not let anyone subvert our democracy with what Donald Trump has been doing, as he did on the debate stage last week, when again in front of 70 million people, he openly attempted to suppress the vote. Joe Biden, on the other hand, on that same debate stage, because clearly Donald Trump doesn't think he can run on a record because it's a failed record, Joe Biden on that stage said, hey, just please vote. So I'll repeat what Joe said. Please vote.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Pence, President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If Vice President Biden is declared the winner and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what would be your role and responsibility as Vice President? What would you personally do? You have 2 minutes.
Well, Susan, first and foremost, I think we're going to win this election. Because while Joe Biden and Kamala Harris rattle off a long litany of the establishment in Washington, D.C., an establishment that Joe Biden's been a part of for 47 years, President Donald Trump has launched a movement of everyday Americans from every walk of life. And I have every confidence that those same Americans that delivered that historic victory in 2016, they see this president's record where we rebuild our military, we revived our economy through tax cuts and rolling back regulation.
Notice that he's not going to answer the question.
American energy. We appointed conservatives to our federal courts at every level. And we stood with the men and women of law enforcement every single day. And I think that movement of Americans has only grown stronger in the last 4 years. When you talk about accepting the outcome of the election, I must tell you, Senator, your party has spent the last 3.5 years trying to overturn the results of the last election. It's amazing. When Joe Biden was Vice President of the United States, the FBI actually spied on President Trump and my campaign.
That's not true.
I mean, there were documents released this week that the CIA actually made a referral to the FBI documenting that those allegations were coming from the Hillary Clinton campaign. And of course, we've all seen the avalanche, what you put the country through for the better part of 3 years until it was found that there was no obstruction, no collusion, case closed.
That's not true either.
Senator Harris, you and your colleagues in the Congress tried to impeach the President of the United States over a phone call. And now Hillary Clinton has actually said to Joe Biden that in her words, under no circumstances should he concede the election. So let me just say, I think we're going to win this election. President Trump and I are fighting every day in courthouses to prevent Joe Biden and Kamala Harris from changing the rules and creating this universal mail-in voting that will create a massive opportunity for voter fraud. We have a free and fair election. We know we're going to have confidence in it. And I believe in all my heart that President Donald Trump's going to be reelected for 4 more years.
You know, I've written all the questions that I've asked tonight, but for the final question of the debate, I'd like to read a question that someone else wrote. The Utah Debate Commission asked students in the state to write essays about what they would like to ask you. And I want to close tonight's debate with the question posed by Brecklin Brown. She's an 8th grader at Springville Junior High in Springville, Utah. And here's what she wrote, quote, "When I watch the news, all I see is arguing between Democrats and Republicans. When I watch the news, all I see is citizen fighting against citizen. When I watch the news, all I see are 2 candidates from opposing parties trying to tear each other down. If our leaders can't get along, How are the citizens supposed to get along? And then she added, your examples could make all the difference to bring us together, end quote. So to each of you in turn, I'd like you to take 1 minute and respond to Brecklin. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute.
Brecklin, it's a wonderful question. And let me just commend you for taking an interest in public life. I started following the news when I was very young. And in America, we believe in a free and open exchange of debate. And we celebrate that. And it's how we've created literally the freest and most prosperous nation in the history of the world. But I would tell you that don't assume that what you're seeing on your local news networks is synonymous with the American people. You know, I look at the relationship between Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late justice who we just lost from the Supreme Court, and the late Justice Antonin Scalia. They were on polar opposites on the Supreme Court of the United States, one very liberal, one very conservative. But what's been learned since her passing was the two of them and their families were the very closest of friends. I mean, here in America, we can disagree. We can debate vigorously, as Senator Harris and I have on this stage tonight. But when the debate is over, we come together as Americans. And that's what people do in big cities and small towns all across this country. So I just want to encourage you, Brecklin. I want to tell you that we're going to work every day to have government as good as our people. And the American people each and every day love a good debate. We love a good argument. But we always come together and are always there for one another.
Thank you,
in
Vice
times of
President.
need. And we've especially learned that
Thank you,
through
Mr.
the
Vice President.
difficulties of this year.
Senator Harris, what would you say to Brecklin?
First of all, I love hearing from our young leaders. And when I hear her words, when I hear your words, Brecklin, I know our future is bright because it is that perspective on who we are and who we should be that is a sign of leadership and is something we should all aspire to be. And that, you know, that brings me to Joe. Joe Biden, one of the reasons that Joe decided to run for president is after Charlottesville, which we talked about earlier. It so troubled him and upset him like it did all of us, that there was that kind of hate and division. What propelled Joe to run for president was to see that over the course of the last 4 years, what Brecklin described has been happening. Joe has a long-standing reputation of working across the aisle and working in a bipartisan way. And that's what he's going to do as president. Joe Biden has a history of lifting people up and fighting for their dignity. I mean, you have to know Joe's story to know that Joe has known pain, he has known suffering, and he has known love. And so, Brecklin, when you think about the future, I do believe the future is bright. And it will be because of your leadership, and it will be because we fight for each person's voice through their vote, and we get engaged in this election because you have the ability through your work and through eventually your vote
Thank you,
to
Senator
determine
Harris.
the future of our country and what its leadership looks like.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Thank you, Vice President Pence. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We want to thank also the University of Utah for its hospitality, and most of all, our thanks to all the Americans who watched this debate tonight. Again, our best wishes for a quick recovery to President Trump, the First Lady, and everyone who is battling COVID-19. The second presidential debate is next week on October 15th, a town hall-style debate in Miami. We hope you'll join us then.
Stick around for a fact check. We're going to do it right now. Okay, so let's dive in. There was a lot to fact check here. Real quick, if you're not yet subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel. I do videos every single day. I've done, you know, I'm coming up on 900 videos. So please subscribe to my channel if you're not yet subscribed. Also, I want to real quick thank people who've donated. I appreciate it. It moves too fast for me to thank you individually, but thank you to those who've donated on YouTube. So let's talk about this debate. You know, the difference between Trump and Pence is that Pence was calmer than Trump, right? Like that's the obvious thing here, but he's just as willing to lie. Like he frames himself as this moderating force to Trump, but he's just doing his job here. His performance shows that they're the exact same thing in different packaging. He was just as willing to egregiously lie. Like, granted, he's not sweating profusely and there's not spittle flying out of his mouth like was the case with Trump, but he'll lie just as shamelessly as the president. So, you know, when we look at Pence, I know that he tries to frame himself as some calm, moderating force, but he's the exact same thing. So let's go through some of what he said. First of all, right off the bat, when we speak about coronavirus, Pence said that Donald Trump puts the health of the American people first. The whole point of this entire scandal is that he didn't. The whole point is that when Trump had information about coronavirus, he knew he had information about its transmissibility. He had information about how lethal it was. He had information about who it affects, old folks and young people. He didn't tell anybody that because he decided it would be better to just lie so as not to panic the American people. Well, let me ask you, are we less panicked now that there's almost 250,000 dead Americans on our hands? Are we less panicked now that we have children that haven't been to school in several months? Are we less panicked that we haven't been able to see our parents and grandparents for almost a year? Like, at some point you have to realize that, like, their desperation to try to get us not to panic has just cleared the runway for us to just live in this prolonged sense of panic anyway. He also points to what else other than Trump's travel ban to China. But here's the thing about the travel ban to China. It didn't work. If it worked, we wouldn't have the most cases and the most deaths on the face of the earth. We have 4% of the world's population, 20% of the world's cases. You can't point to something like the travel ban and celebrate it as if it was some catch-all solution when we're in the worst situation of any country on the face of the earth. I've said this in my videos before. It's like congratulating yourself for buying a fire extinguisher and your house is burned down right next to you. It didn't work. The China ban didn't work. If it did, the situation would be solved. And instead, we have the most cases, most deaths on the face of the earth. One more thing that Pence says about coronavirus is he points to this fact that we could have lost 2 million people, he says. When Pence points to the fact that we could have lost 2 million people, that is in the situation that we did nothing at all. If the administration just sat back and said, oh, well, there's a pandemic, so, let's just, hunker down and see how it goes, which, by the way, is not far off from what they did. If it wasn't for Democratic governors who Trump then went on to attack and foment protests against, like Gretchen Whitmer, that would have been the situation anyway. Luckily, we do have, half of this country's governors, and in fairness, a few Republican governors too, like DeWine in Ohio and Hogan in Maryland, who took this thing seriously. It was only thanks to that we were able to bring the numbers down significantly in places like New York and New Jersey. And instead, what you saw was the governors who typically kowtow to Donald Trump, governors like down in Florida, and in Texas, who then saw their cases explode because they opted to take the Trump train of thought on this. So when Pence says we could have lost 2 million people, I don't think the bar for the federal government is to do literally nothing at all. I don't think that's what we should aspire to. And so, I don't think that's a good way to judge here, and I don't think that that's a good way to absolve the fact that 250,000 Americans, that we're approaching 250,000 dead Americans from this virus. Let's talk about the super spreader event. Pence had said that with regard to holding that super spreader event, the Amy Coney Barrett event that ultimately ended up infecting, a dozen White House staffers or more, Pence says that when given the facts, the American people do what's right to protect themselves. Which is an interesting thing to say, considering they weren't given the facts. I mean, the American people weren't given the facts about this virus. Trump himself admitted in the Bob Woodward interview that we didn't have all the facts, that when Trump knew the transmissibility of the virus, the lethality of the virus, that it could affect young and old people, he didn't tell anybody. Admittedly, he tried to keep it a secret so as not to panic anyone. So when Pence says, when given the facts, the American people do what's right to protect themselves, we're not being given the facts. And furthermore, the people that listen to this president are under the impression that masks are an important element of protecting yourself. Again, they're not being given the truth with regard to to the protection that masks give. Masks are the single most effective tool that we have right now to protect ourselves from coronavirus. The single most effective tool. And anybody that's watched this president over the last 8 months will think that it's not only not an important tool, but just some liberal plot to overthrow the government. Pence actually goes on to say that the left cares only about mandates like masks. We have mandates in this country. We're a country of laws. We have mandates. We wear seatbelts in cars. That's a mandate. We wear clothing in public. Try walking into a restaurant with no pants on and tell me that we don't have mandates in this country. So, Republicans throw out these buzzwords like freedom and liberty, but in reality, it's just an excuse to absolve them for doing nothing. We should have a mask mandate in every single locality, in every single state in this country. Because the fact is that this isn't just an issue of individual freedom. Masks are a public health response to this virus. When one person gets it, it's not like not wearing a mask will just protect them. If one person gets it, they spread it to other people. That's how this virus works. We know that it's transmissible, that it's spread through the air, that it's spread through proximity to other people. So we should absolutely have a mandate. And in fact, the states and localities that do implement mandates and the stores that do implement mandates are taking the steps they need to keep themselves safe. Pence goes on to brag about the fact that they're going to have a vaccine ready before the end of the year. Something important to remember about a vaccine is they're looking at it as a solution to contain the spread of this virus, right? That's the whole point of trying to push forward this vaccine. We have a solution now, and that's masks. And they're more helpful. If two people speaking to each other are both wearing masks, they'll protect each other. So we have a solution right now, and yet instead of lifting up that solution, they've batted it down, they've swatted it down, they've politicized the use of masks again. So they're so hell-bent on getting this vaccine out, but we had a way to protect ourselves from this virus all along. And when the Trump administration could have been helping the American people, and by the way, helping themselves politically, they opted to just pretend that masks were, again, some liberal communist plot to have the government overtake the American people's freedoms. Pence also accuses Kamala Harris of undermining public confidence in a vaccine. There is no public confidence in this administration when it comes to science. This is an administration that has pushed hydroxychloroquine only to see it have adverse effects on the hearts of those patients that were in the trials. This is an administration, Trump has stood up there suggesting that we inject disinfectant. This is not the administration that you go to for the truth about science. So, and I think that extends right on forward for vaccines. And that's proven in the polling that we've seen. The vast majority, something like 3/4 of Americans, don't trust this administration when it comes to a vaccine. This isn't some, deep state plot. This isn't some left-wing plot. This is the majority of Americans who see, hey, maybe the fact that a vaccine is slated to come out, what Trump has said on November 1st, doesn't mean it's safe. It means that it's just 48 hours before the election. People are not dumb, and they can see the obvious that they're trying to pull here. When it comes to the economy, all Pence can say is that Biden will raise taxes on everyone. Biden and Kamala Harris have been breathless here in explaining that Biden won't raise his taxes on anyone making under $400,000. That's it. If you're making above $400,000, your taxes will be raised. If you're making below $400,000, which is 99% of Americans, then you won't see an increase in your taxes. The average salary for Americans in this country is $63,000. $63,000. So when Mike Pence and Donald Trump attack the Biden plan for raising taxes on people making above $400,000, think about who they're speaking to. Think about who they're speaking to, because it's not you. It's not 99% of the people in this country. It's their donors. I mean, they focus their message on a very specific subset of people, and it's people that look an awful lot like themselves. Pence also says that it's nonsense that the Trump administration is coming for your pre-existing conditions. Donald Trump's administration is in court right now trying to dismantle the ACA. The ACA is the only law we have protecting coverage for pre-existing conditions. It's the only law right now that we have making sure that people who are 26 and under are covered on their parents' health plans. They are in court as we speak, defended by this administration's Department of Justice, trying to dismantle the ACA. And that court case will be heard 1 week after the election in mid-November. I believe it's November 10th. So when they say that they're not trying to, they're not coming for your pre-existing conditions, that's completely divorced from reality. Again, the only thing protecting pre-existing conditions is the ACA. They're trying to overturn the ACA. Do the math. With regard to climate change, Pence says that the jury is still out on why climate change is happening, and he touts that we have the cleanest air and energy. The Trump administration dismantled 100 Obama-era regulations to protect the environment. Things like protecting streams from toxic dumping, methane gas releases into the atmosphere, fuel standards for cars. Like, I don't know who is walking around thinking that we want our cars to have worse fuel mileage. These things are completely antithetical to what the American people want, and they're antithetical to claiming that we have the cleanest air and water when they're out there trying to dismantle everything we have to protect the air and water. Also, one more thing, Pence fearmongers about banning fossil fuels as if people are going to go out demanding that we retain our reliance on fossil fuels. Who's out there voting based on the desires of ExxonMobil? Whose thing is like, oh well, I vote for Shell. I vote for Shell gas. That's my litmus test issue. The American people realize that climate change is an existential crisis, and our reliance on fossil fuels isn't about anything other than the fact that Republicans overwhelmingly benefit from campaign donations from fossil fuel companies. That's it. Oil and gas companies fund Republicans' campaigns. They want to keep them in business so they can keep cashing their checks. That's it. It has nothing to do with the fact that, with this notion that fossil fuels are going to benefit us. We're ceding our leadership in the area of renewables, which is the future. The entire world's going to be picking up renewables. We're ceding our leadership in renewables so that we can double down, triple down on a dying industry, on fossil fuels and on coal. Coal jobs, Trump promised to bring back coal. Coal jobs have dwindled to almost nothing during his administration. And in fact, renewables has exploded. That's an industry that we should be leading in, that we should be leading the world in. And instead, we're ceding that leadership to who else but China. All because this administration needs to pander to fossil fuel companies and to coal companies so that they could get money for their re-election campaigns. It doesn't benefit you. It doesn't benefit this country. It benefits them and their careers. Now, something else that they move to next is the Green New Deal. Pence talks about this manufacturing boom that we're seeing under Trump. There is no manufacturing boom. The last year, prior to coronavirus, starting in February, so 6 months ago when coronavirus was just hitting, the year prior to that, we saw 16,000 factory jobs lost in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. 16,000 factory jobs lost in the industrial Midwest. And that was before coronavirus hit. There is no manufacturing boom happening in this country. And this is something they lean on just by virtue of repeating it over and over and over again, that they can, that they figure that they can kind of convince people just by virtue of repeating baseless talking points, but it doesn't actually have any grounding in reality. Next, Pence tries to attack Kamala Harris on being the most liberal senator, and this is an attack that everybody saw coming. She is liberal, and the items that she's liberal on are items that are popular with the American people. She's liberal on healthcare, and you know what? The American people approve of Democrats' position on healthcare. In fact, in 2018, for the midterms, we won 41 seats in the House. It was the biggest margin in American history in the House. So, and that entire midterm election was predicated on healthcare. So yeah, she's liberal on healthcare. And you know what? The vast majority of the American people are too. She's liberal on women's rights. Issues like Roe versus Wade. And you know what? The American people support that by a vast plurality as well. She's liberal on voting rights, something the American people support. All of these issues that she's liberal on are issues that the American people approve of. They they throw this word liberal around like it's some devastating gotcha cudgel against Democrats. But the fact is that, on the issues that she's liberal on, that Democrats are liberal on, are the issues that the American people are liberal on too, and they overwhelmingly approve of these issues. Let's talk about China for a second. Pence attacks Biden for not playing straight with the American people with regard to China, which is ironic, coming from this administration that knowingly downplayed this virus. I mean, Trump admitted it to Bob Woodward. He admitted that he downplayed it so as not to panic people. So for them, they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth in this administration. Trump is saying, Trump and Pence are saying at the same time that Biden is bad because he downplayed the threat of this virus. Which, by the way, Biden has tweets as early as October of 2019 warning of a pandemic. And in fact, the Biden-Obama administration left the Trump administration a pandemic playbook and a pandemic response team, both of which were dismantled once Trump took office. So to claim that they didn't play it straight with the American people is just completely baseless. He also says that Pence says that NATO is paying more for common defense now, and then that's a great thing. But here's the thing: with regard to NATO, we've alienated all of our allies. We've alienated everybody in deference to strongmen and autocrats and dictators around the world. We've alienated, strong allies like Germany and the UK and France and Canada at times, all in deference to Erdogan and Vladimir Putin and MBS in Saudi Arabia. Kim Jong-un in North Korea. So when he touts this idea that they're trying to get NATO members to pay more for spending, we're undermining that on our own just by virtue of completely kowtowing to autocrats and completely alienating our allies around the world. Pence then says, the USA under Trump will never hesitate to take action. I would just say to that, tell that to Jamal Khashoggi's family. Not only did Trump hesitate, he's never acted. There's never been any retaliation against Jamal Khashoggi. He never retaliated against Vladimir Putin for placing bounties on our soldiers' heads. He never retaliated against Putin for interfering in our election. So when Pence says that Trump will never hesitate to take action, I mean, maybe if it's maybe as long as it benefits him politically, he won't, or it doesn't benefit him politically, he won't. But in other situations where he's faced with these strongmen who absolutely deserve retaliation, suddenly it's crickets from Donald Trump. So I'm really not sure what Pence is talking about with regard to not hesitating to take action. Pence then says that Donald Trump reveres the military, which is rich. I mean, where do we start? Trump dodged the draft. Like, how much does he? At what point in his visit to Vietnam would you say that he revered the military the most? In which deployment to Vietnam would you say that Donald Trump revered the military the most? Trump dodged the draft. He mocked John McCain. He mocked Gold Star families, Khizr Khan. He made it so that we abandoned the Kurds and alienated our most important ally in the fight against ISIS. Trump didn't go to a World War I ceremony because it was drizzling. I mean, we can go on and on. We have the articles that have come out and saying that Trump has referred to our fallen as losers and suckers. What was in it for them? Like, not only does Trump not revere the military, he's expressed nothing but disdain and contempt for this military. And we see this on a daily basis. On the Supreme Court, Pence was asked if he would want to see Roe overturned, and unsurprisingly, he wouldn't say whether he'd want to see that. He does say that he's not sure how Amy Coney Barrett would rule on that, which is just rich. I tell you what, if there's one thing that I'll believe, it's that Mike Pence isn't sure how Amy Coney Barrett would rule on the issue of Roe versus Wade. That's really something. He also attacks Kamala on the Supreme Court thing, saying that with regard to packing the courts, that Democrats want to rewrite the rules when they don't benefit them. I think we should ask a Supreme Court Justice Merrick Garland what he thinks about changing the rules once they don't benefit one political party. The fact is that we're in a situation that under Republicans' own rule, under Mitch McConnell's own rule, a president cannot nominate a Supreme Court justice in the last year of his term, as far out as 9 months, because the American people deserve a voice in who that justice is, or who the president is, who would then choose that justice. Now that we have a Republican president, we're in a situation where, Trump has less than a month left in office. Americans have already voted. Millions of Americans have already voted. States like North Carolina, I mean, there are literal millions of ballots already in. So you want to talk about giving the American people a voice? They are ramming this Supreme Court nomination through. One, because that should tell you how confident they are in Trump's chances. But two, I mean, to talk about changing the rules when they don't benefit them, when they don't work for them, I mean, is bananas. And the fact is, Pence tries to get this gotcha moment on Kamala Harris, where he says, "Do you agree with packing the court?" We should expand the Supreme Court. Absolutely. You know why? Because expanding the Supreme Court means that we protect Roe versus Wade. It means that we protect the ACA. It means that we protect voting rights in this country. It means that we can protect what will inevitably be climate change legislation in this country. These are all popular programs in the United States. These are all popular laws in the United States. These are all popular ideas in the United States. Yeah, we should expand the Supreme Court if that means that we'll have a balanced Supreme Court that will reflect the will of the American people, especially on these issues. When you have 70% of the nation that supports Roe v. Wade, and the only thing that's going to protect Roe v. Wade is a rebalanced court, is adding justices to the court, then yeah, how is that a politically toxic issue? It's not, and we should expand the court if we're in a situation where it's a 6-3 majority and a minority of Republican-led, activist judges are going to dismantle something that the vast majority, almost 3/4 of the American people support. So yes, I mean, Pence didn't get his answer to the gotcha question that he was looking for, but if he did, I mean, yeah, we should absolutely expand the Supreme Court. And I think the vast majority of people would agree with that. Pence goes on then to talk about his Christian faith and trying to paint Biden. I mean, this is what they do. This is this whole culture war BS, right? Like Pence fashions himself as this Christian, this devout Christian who's defending the integrity of religion in this country, and Joe Biden is some far left Antifa super soldier who's going to make it illegal to say God and make Christmas go away or whatever they're stuck on right now. Here's the thing about Pence's Christian faith. He defends a guy and is complicit in the administration of someone who cheated on his wife while he was, having an affair with porn stars and models while his wife was at home pregnant with their son. Is that Christian? Pence defends a guy who tried to take healthcare away from 20 million Americans by overturning the ACA. Is that Christian? Trump's budget took away funds from programs like Meals on Wheels, which feeds seniors and disabled veterans. Is that Christian? Trump's budget cut off funding to Medicaid, which is healthcare for older and low-income folks. Is that Christian? Nothing this administration does. Locking kids in cages, is that Christian? Like, where does the list end? So you want to talk about trying to make this a referendum on Christianity, but that's a losing argument for this administration. There's nothing, evangelicals might support Trump, but there's nothing Christian about what this administration does. And I think that presents itself on a daily basis. With regard to the last point, which is the peaceful transition of power, all Mike Pence can do is point to Hillary Clinton, because who would they be running against in 2020 other than Hillary Clinton? I mean, Trump is still literally tweeting about Hillary as late as today. Today, they're still running against Hillary Clinton. On October 7th of 2020, they're running against Hillary Clinton. He says that the federal government spied on Trump's campaign. That's not true. The DOJ during the Obama administration was investigating Mike Flynn, who eventually was indicted. So this wasn't unfounded. Pence pretends that he repeats this Trump line. And this is why I say that Pence, may have a different temperament than Donald Trump, but he's just as shameless of a liar. Pence repeats this Republican line, this talking point, that Trump was wrongfully impeached over a phone call. Yeah, he was impeached over a phone call because within that phone call, he tried to extort a foreign country into giving him dirt on Joe Biden. He was impeached over a phone call, but the phone call wasn't just like, hey, what's up? It was, hey, can you do us a favor though? We'll give you this if you give us this. It's a quid pro quo. I mean, so yeah, he was impeached over a phone call, but the fact that it was a phone call doesn't diminish its importance. Pence also, finally, the last thing that he says is, he says that Democrats are trying to change the rules to allow for universal mail-in voting. The reason that we are going for universal mail-in voting is because there is a pandemic. There is a deadly pandemic sweeping across this country that has killed 210,000 people and infected almost 8 million people. So when we look for a need for universal mail-in voting, it's to keep people alive. And his refusal to acknowledge that is a testament to his broader refusal and this administration's broader refusal to acknowledge that to acknowledge this pandemic even exists. It goes right back into their broader strategy of denialism with this pandemic. Why? Because it doesn't benefit them politically. From day one, they've been downplaying this pandemic because they didn't want to spook the stock market and hurt the economy, which was Trump's biggest talking point heading into the election. That's why they downplayed this pandemic, and they're still doing it to this day. They're not doing it for the economy anymore. The economy's shot. We have double the unemployment that we had when Trump took over. Obama left Trump 4.7% rate unemployment. We're at 8% unemployment now. They've doubled the unemployment rate. We have 11 million Americans out of jobs. Donald Trump is the only president in modern American history who will end this term with a job loss. The only president in modern America. He's going to leave. He will end his term at the end of his term here with 4 million jobs lost. The only president in modern American history to have done that. So the economy is shot, but I mean, now they're just doing it because now they're just continuing to downplay the severity of this pandemic because they have a vested interest. Their re-elections depend on them pretending that they've done a good job, that they've contained this virus, that they've managed the outbreak well. And I mean, they're fighting against the grain because the fact is that we have 4% of the world's population and 20% of the world's deaths. And they can walk around and pretend that well, we did the best we could, that we couldn't have done any better, but we could have. And the way you know that is by looking at just about any country in the face of the earth. Look at Canada. Look at New Zealand. Look at Australia. Look at Germany. Look at South Korea. Those countries had the same virus that we did. Came from the same place in China that ours did. The only difference is that their government leaders decided to take it seriously. They decided to coordinate nationwide testing and contact tracing system. They produced PPE for their frontline workers. They enacted mask mandates across their countries. They issued stay-at-home orders. The Trump administration did none of that. None of that. The entire time, the Trump administration, and in fact, not only did they not do that, they fomented protests against stay-at-home orders. Trump was tweeting out, liberate Michigan, liberate Minnesota, liberate Virginia. He tried to pretend masks were even as late as when Trump came back from Walter Reed Hospital to the White House and majestically stood there and took his mask off his face. It's been the same message since day one. So you can pretend that Trump's been pro-mask, but nothing that he's actually done lends itself to that idea. So, going back to the issue of a peaceful transfer of power and Pence saying that Democrats are trying to change the rules to allow for universal mail-in voting, the reason that Democrats want universal mail-in voting is because they want people to survive through this pandemic. They want people to survive, and they know that, if we're forced to wait in long lines, and we've seen that there's long lines, especially in urban areas where Democrats are favored, if there's long lines, that increases the likelihood for people to catch it. And so they're banking on the fact They're banking on the fact that if they don't allow for mail-in voting, that they will force people to go to the polls, and that people will be too scared to go to the polls because there's a pandemic, and so they won't vote. That's the whole point of all of this. It all comes down to one thing, and that's retaining their grip on power. So, with that said, thank you guys so much for sticking around for this fact check. I really appreciate it. If you haven't, again, please subscribe to my channel. That's the number one thing I could ask of you right now is please subscribe to my channel. I'll be doing, fact check videos every single day, 7 days a week, sometimes as many as, 4 if I can get to it. So thank you again for sticking around. And we'll do it again next week. The next presidential debate is going to be October 15th, I believe. So that's next Thursday. We'll see if they can prop Trump up, a la, what is it? I can't even remember the movie right now. Let's see if they can prop him up or pump him full of enough steroids that he'll actually make it to this debate. But in the meantime, stay safe. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next week.